Everybody knows what they look like. Black suit off a rack nobody has ever been able to name. White shirt, thin black tie. Sunglasses on, at 10 in the morning, in a county where the sky has been one flat piece of gray since the first week of October. A sedan at the curb, with the engine running and no plate on the front. Two of them coming up the walk-in step, and two quick knocks, and then the smile. That is the part everybody gets, right when they tell it. The smile with no teeth in it, and it lands on the second man's face about half a second after it lands on the first man's, like the both of them heard the same instruction, and one of them has a longer wire. Mr. So-and-so. Just checking in, making sure you've been feeling safe lately. It has been a joke my whole life. Some fella in Ohio puts up 30 seconds of lights over a bean field, and by breakfast there's two of them on his porch, asking a question that isn't a question, and the video is gone, and his hard drive clicks twice and spins down and never comes up again, and he tells it in a bar for the next 20 years, and every man at that bar already knows the ending. Ask anybody in this county to draw one. They will all draw the same picture, and they will all get the tie right. That is not what a secret looks like. A secret doesn't have a costume. I have run a wrecker for 15 years, 4 of them for Kish, over in Bly and the rest here. Underneath the winching and the paperwork, that job is standing on a shoulder at 2 in the morning and deciding in about 6 seconds whether the man walking up out of the dark is drunk or hurt or lying, because the rest of the night goes different depending on which one he is. A man gets good at that or a man gets hurt. So when those two came up my walk that fall, I had them read before the first one got his mouth open. Not dangerous. Not federal. 2 men doing a bit, and doing it about as well as a bad waiter does a birthday song. They are not bad at hiding. That is the part that has it backwards, and it took me a while and it cost me to get it turned around the right way. They were never hiding. The reason some fella in Ohio can describe the suit and the glasses and the car right down to the tint on the glass is that he was meant to be able to. They are the lights on top of the ambulance. Nobody ever looks at what is inside the ambulance. The ones who do the actual work don't wear black. Black is a claim. Black says something owns the man wearing it, and something does, and he knows it, and that is the whole reason he cannot take the glasses off. The real ones wear gray. Gray is the color of no claim. I didn't know one word of any of that on the 29th of October, coming up Old Furnace Road with the light bar going and a coffee in the holder that had gone cold 5 hours before. The call came in at 2:40 in the morning, and Wanda read it to me the way she read everything, off the top of the page and without any interest in it. Rollover, Old Furnace Road, half a mile up past the bog. No injuries reported. Caller was the driver. I took it because there wasn't anybody else. I'd been sitting in the lot at Vetter's with the heater going and the coffee I bought at the Sheets in Bly at 9 the night before wedged in the cup holder, cold enough by then to have a skin on it. I drank it anyway. The wrecker is a 1999 International with a Century body and 190,000 miles that Gary Vetter tells people is 140. It's mine on paper. I owe $11,000 on it, and I make the payment out of what I clear driving it, which is a circle I've been walking 4 years without finding the door out of. Old Furnace Road runs north out of Dunlow past the bog and up the shoulder of the bank, 2 lanes with no shoulder of its own, a lip of shale, and then the drop into the hemlock. There's a frost heave a mile up, and a man who doesn't know it's there takes it at 40 and loses the back end. Everybody local knows it's there. It's almost never anybody local out on that road. 11 minutes from the lot. I don't think in miles. Ask me how far Bly is and I'll say 20 minutes. I came up over the heave, and there was no flare and no hazards, and for 4 seconds I thought Wanda had the location wrong. Then my lights caught the underside of the car in the ditch on the right, and the underside of a car reads different from anything else in the world at night. Flat and pale, with that oil shine on it. A Corolla, maybe 2015. Silver. On its roof, in 14 inches of ditch water and cattail stubble, wheels up, one of them still turning slow. I don't get out right away. A wreck tells the truth in the first 30 seconds if a man sits still and lets it, and after that people start talking instead. So I sat there with the light bar going, and I read it. No glass on the road. That was the first thing. A car goes over at speed and the side glass lets go, and there's pebbled safety glass across both lanes, still twinkling in the gravel a week later like somebody dumped a bag of it. There wasn't any. Not a piece. Not anywhere my light reached. No tracks either. Ground was frozen, sure, but a car doesn't cross a berm without taking some of it along. There's always a scar. A gouge where the bumper cover dug in, or grass laid flat and pointing the way the thing went. The weeds beside that car stood straight up on both sides of it, the way they'd been standing all winter, with frost on them, like somebody set it down. That was the thought I had, and I put it away, because it's the kind of thought that comes to a man at 2:40 in the morning with his blood sugar on the floor. I got out. The cold got in under my collar. I've had the same Carhartt since 2011, burn hole in the left cuff from a torch, and every time I've got the money for another one, there's a tire or a tooth or a birthday. The engine was still warm. I could feel it off the pan from 3 feet away, and the radio was on. Key stays an accessory a lot in a rollover. What it was playing was nothing, not static. Static's got weather in it, static moves. This was the flat hum a receiver makes when it's locked onto a carrier with nothing riding on it. I leaned down and looked in through where the driver's window should have been. The glass wasn't broken. The window was down. All four of them were down on a night that was 20 degrees. I said hello into the car, because that's what a man does. Nobody answered. There was nobody in it. I put my light around and found her out in the field on the far side, 30 feet off the road in the dead goldenrod. Woman, 50s, good wool coat, no gloves, arms down at her sides. She wasn't looking at her car. That's the part I keep coming back to. In 12 years, I have never once pulled up on a wreck and found the driver not looking at the wreck. They stand there with the phone still in their hand and stare at the thing that already happened like it's still happening. I've had a man in a suit try to hand me his side mirror like it was a receipt. She had her back to it. She was facing north and a little east, up the grade, and what's up the grade that way is the Dunlow Calm Bank. It's a 140-foot pile of coal refuse from the Kessler workings, and it has been burning underneath since 1962, before I was born. Smoke comes out the top of it in a column, straight up, in wind. I quit thinking about it years ago the way a man quits thinking about a water tower. She was looking at it the way a person looks at somebody who called their name in a crowd. I went out to her. The ground under the frost had a give to it that I noticed and didn't think about. "Ma'am," I said, "you all right?" She turned her head, and she was crying. Not making noise about it, just running, both sides, catching on her jaw. Her face was doing nothing at all. It was like watching a window in the rain. "I'm all right," she said. "Are you hurt anywhere? Neck, back, head?" "I'm all right," she said again. "I was going to my sister's in Bly." That was 2 hours out of her way, and I didn't say so. I got her name for the sheet. Marta Dietz. She spelled the last one without me asking. Dietz, in a flat, pleasant voice like she was on the phone with an insurance company, and the whole time her eyes kept going back up the grade. I asked if she called 911, and she said she called the number on her card. I asked if she wanted to sit in the truck where it was warm, and she said no thank you. And then she said the thing I've gone back over more than anything else. I have to stay where they can see me. I looked where she was looking. There's nothing up there. 140 feet of black waste rock with dead ground around it for a quarter mile, where nothing takes, not even the multiflora rose that grows out of a crack in a parking lot. Gray shale. And the smoke going up. I put it down to shock. So I told her I'd get the car out and she could ride down and we'd sort it at the shop. Walking back, I did the arithmetic, because I always do. 240 for the recovery, plus mileage, plus storage if the sister doesn't come get it inside a day. A little more than half of the 480 I owed the credit union by the 15th. My every other weekend with Nell started Friday, and last time we'd eaten at the Burger King in Bly because I told her it was a treat. She's 9. Front tooth came in crooked, turned about a quarter of the way around, and Shauna's got her on a list to get it looked at. She collects those little packets out of shoe boxes, the ones that say do not eat. She keeps them in a secrets tin because she's decided they're contraband, and she likes having contraband. I have never once corrected her about it. The tooth and the 480. That's what was in my head crossing that field. Nothing but money and my kid's mouth. I got to the truck and racked the light out and turned to run the cable, and there were 2 men standing on the other side of the Corolla. I had walked past that spot 40 seconds before, both in suits. Gray suits, the flat kind a man buys at the Boscov's in Bly for a funeral, and neither one fit right through the shoulders. No overcoats, at 20 degrees. The older one was small, reading glasses on a cord against his tie, with the face of a man who has spent 30 years telling people things they didn't want to hear about their own equipment. The other was taller, and stood with his hands at his sides and never once looked at me. There was no car. My lights ran 100 yards up that road and 100 back. There was nowhere for a car to be, and the frost had gone around them. I had the handlight at my hip and the beam on the ground, and the ground between me and them was silver, that fine white bloom that comes up out of shale when it's been cold since sundown. Around each of their shoes there was a ring of black, clean at the edge, about the size of a dinner plate, the way it goes around a fence post that's been in the sun. That doesn't happen in the 6 seconds it takes to walk over. That happens from standing. The older one had a little book in his left hand, cloth-covered, gray, the size of a paperback and soft at the corners, open on his palm, and he was reading down it with his glasses on the end of his nose. "You're not on the sheet," he said. I said, "What?" He put a finger on the page and looked up over the glasses. "You're not on the sheet," he said. "There's supposed to be a man here from Wilkes-Barre, and there isn't. I've got 7 minutes." I told him I was the wrecker, and it was my call, and that if he was with the insurance, he could take it up at the shop in the morning. My voice came out doing the thing it does on a scene, that flat, everything's fine voice, and it sounded to me like somebody else asking a question. He looked at me a second longer than a man looks at another man. "You'll do," he said. Then he closed the book on his finger and said, "Come around here and stand where I put you, and don't touch her, and don't take anything off her, and don't say your own name out loud. Not to me, not to her, not for any reason. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" I understood the words. That's the most I can say. I had my hand on the winch control by then, the pistol grip on the coil cord, worn smooth on the trigger side, and I stood there with my thumb on the free spool like it was going to keep me on the ground. I cracked my left hand against my palm without deciding to. 2 fingers on that hand, the ring and the little one, are fused stiff at the middle knuckle from a cable that came apart on me in 2009. There's no joint left in them to make a sound, and they make one anyway. The wind came around off the grade and brought the smell down off the bank. Wet pennies, cold ash. I went around the car. I've asked myself why I did what a stranger in a bad suit told me to do without one word of argument. Best I can figure, I've spent my working life on the shoulders of roads with troopers and DOT men, and every one of them shows up and starts telling people where to stand. He had the voice for it. He had the little book. That's all it has ever taken. He put me on the driver's side of the Corolla, facing out into the field, and then he moved me twice. 1.5 feet back, with the flat of his hand on my chest, and then, after he'd looked at me and looked at Marta Dietz out in the goldenrod, 4 inches forward. "Arm's length," he said. "Not closer. Closer is a party." He put his own arm out to show me, wrist to wrist. "Not further either. Further isn't present." "Present for what?" I said. He didn't answer that. He walked out into the field with the taller one behind him, and they took up a spot near her, and he opened the book against his forearm and took out a pen. I want to describe the pen, because it's the only part of that night I can hold on to without it sliding. Black barrel, no clip, the kind of thing a plumber leaves at your house. He wrote with it, and the line it left had no shine. Ink has a shine when it's fresh. Even the cheap ballpoint they give out at the bank runs wet a couple seconds before it goes dull, and I was standing at the right angle to see it, 'cause my light bar was going and the whole field was strobing red. His line went on the page already dull, and it didn't dry so much as go down into the paper. I watched a word he'd written get shallower while I looked at it. Marta Dietz had turned around. Not toward the car, toward the two of them. She was crying still, and now she was talking, and I couldn't hear a word of it. Not because she was quiet. She wasn't quiet. Her mouth was working, and her chest was going, and she got up on her toes at one point, the way people do. I could hear my own truck idling 40 feet behind me, and the wheel on that Corolla still turning with a tick in it, and I could not hear her. The older one wrote. Then, under everything, there was a sound. The best I can do with it is a big door being closed somewhere below the road. Not slammed. Closed the way a man closes a door in a house where somebody's sleeping, hand on the knob the whole way, taking the weight of it, the latch going over at the end, and big. Big is not the same thing as loud. It came up through the shale, and I could feel the seam of the boot sole against my heel, and the ground was warm. It was 20 degrees. My breath was coming out in a solid white rope, and the frost was on the goldenrod, and through the bottoms of my boots, Georges, with a steel plate in them, my feet were warm, the way they get standing on a garage floor over a heat run. I looked down at my own feet like a jackass. Around my boots the frost had gone black in a ring the size of a dinner plate. Don't. That was the whole thought. Not don't what, just don't. He said something to her, and she answered, and reached out and put her hand flat on the cover of the book, the way a witness puts a hand on a Bible in a courtroom, and she held it there, and the crying stopped. That's not how crying stops. It hitches and comes down, and there's a raw part after. Hers stopped like a tap. 1 second she was running from both eyes, and the next, her face was dry and her breathing was even. Nothing on her cheeks. Not a track, not a shine. Don't blink, the older one said. He said it without turning around, and I understood he was talking to me. Tell me not to breathe and I can go 2 minutes. Tell me not to blink and I've got about 4 seconds in me. I got my eyes wide and held them, and the cold got in around them and they ran, and I clamped down. Once. Fast. The taller one turned his head toward me for the first and only time. The older one said a word. I didn't catch it. I heard it come out of him with the shape of a word, 3 parts to it maybe, and it went by me the way a car goes by on the highway when a man isn't looking at it, and when I reached for the sound of it, a half-second later, it wasn't in my head. There was a hole where it should have been, and I could feel the edges of the hole, like reaching for a name. Then he licked his thumb and turned back a page and made a correction, and I could hear the pen through it, a small dragging sound, and he blew across it once. The whole thing took less time than a tire change. He shut the book and put it in his inside pocket, and the two of them came back across the field, and the taller one went off up the road into the dark. I never saw him again, and I never learned his name. Marta Dietz walked past me to the truck. She had her purse. I don't know where it came from. She opened the passenger door with her thumb on the button and climbed up and sat there with her knees together, and when I got in on my side she looked over at me and said, in a pleasant voice, with her face doing all the ordinary things a face does, "Do you take cards? I've only got about $40 on me." I told her we take cards at the shop. She said, "Good, because I don't like to carry cash." And then she said, "I hope this isn't going to make my sister worry." She had a piece of goldenrod stuck to her coat. That's all there was on her. No mud, no blood, her hair not out of place, and she'd been upside down in a ditch. I did the recovery, hooked the frame at the rear crossmember, rolled her onto the wheels, dragged her up out of the cattails, and got her on the deck. 35 minutes, every step of it correct, and I could not tell you one thing about doing it. My hands did it. The older one rode in behind me the whole way down Old Furnace Road, and I could not tell you where the car came from. Brown Oldsmobile, Bondo patch on the right rear quarter that somebody had primered and never painted. That's the kind of thing I notice first about anybody. What they're driving, and then later, who they are. I dropped Marta Dietz at the shop and she signed the sheet with my Bic, and the line it left had a shine on it. She got in a cab, Wanda called, and went to Bly. 11 days later, the standard speaker had her dead in her sleep at her sister's house, 56 years old, no cause given, survived by a son. I have looked at that clipping more times than is good for a person, but that was later, that night, in the gravel lot at Vedder's, with the Corolla on the deck behind me and the sky over the bank doing the thing it does at 4 in the morning, where it isn't lighter but the shape of the ridge comes up out of it. The old man got out and stood at the fender of my truck. "Ordell Mace," he said. He didn't offer his hand. I started to give him mine back, and he put 2 fingers up. "Don't," he said, "not tonight. Ask me Thursday if you still want to." Then he took an envelope out of his coat and set it on the fender and stepped back from it. It was gray, no window, no printing, not even a flap seal, just tucked. He didn't hand it to me. He put it down and moved away from it, and the part of me that has been at enough scenes to know when a man is being careful with something understood that the not handing it over was the whole point. "That's yours," he said. "Don't thank me for it." I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's what you're owed." Then he got in the Oldsmobile and turned north on 924 toward Bly, and his taillight on the left side was out. I picked it up. It was thin. I opened it in the truck with the dome light on. $480, 20s mostly, and 450s, used bills. None of them new, none of them in order. The payment on the truck was $480, not $479 and something, not $500. The credit union in Bly wrote it up in 2022 at $480 even, and I have made that payment 41 times. I have never told anybody that number. Not Gary. Not Shauna. Especially not Shauna. My father was a man who said numbers out loud at the kitchen table, and I watched what it did to a room. I put the envelope on the dash and sat in the lot with the engine running until the sun came up over the ridge, and the smoke went straight up off the bank the whole time, and there was no wind, so it didn't prove a thing. The envelope stayed on the dash. For 2 days I did what a man does, which is decide it was something else and go to work. Wednesday I was in the shop by 7. Gary Vedder came in at 9 like always, in the good coat he wears to not do anything in, and stood in front of the space heater with his coffee. "Chief," he said, because he calls everybody Chief and has since before I worked for him, "that Toyota going anywhere?" I said the sister in Bly was coming for it. "Storage on it after Friday," he said, and then stood there another minute and told me about his knee. Gary's 63 and hasn't turned a wrench since the Bush administration, and he'll tell you so himself like it's an accomplishment. I liked that morning. The shop smelled like cold concrete, and the burnt smell off that heater. The radio was doing school delays. I ran a starter out of a Ranger, and everything in the world was the size it's supposed to be. That afternoon I did a repo out toward Shepton, a Dodge 3 payments behind. The man was at work, and the truck was in the driveway, and he found out from his wife. Coming back, I took Old Furnace because it's faster to the shop, and that's a lie. It isn't faster. It's 4 minutes longer. I slowed at the bog. Cadger's Bog is black water with hemlock coming down to it on the north side, and it sits on the outside of a curve, and there's a guardrail there the state put in the year after my brother went into it. P.D. Chambliss, 19 years old. 1998, the last week of August. At some hour of the night nobody ever gave me a number for. He had a 72 Nova with a primer spot on the left rear quarter he'd been going to paint since June. They got the car out in 3 days. I was 11. I was home in bed with a fever. They took me to Bly for the next morning. I didn't stop. I go past that spot 4 or 5 times a week, and I have never once stopped. And there's a cemetery 2 minutes off 924 where his stone is, and I put a flag on it for my mother in 2019 and haven't been since. Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, there was a black car at the curb in front of my place. I rent the upstairs of a house on Bergen Street off a woman who lives in Florida, and that curb is where the feral gas truck parks and nobody else. Crown, Victoria, black, the Interceptor body, clean in a way no car in this county is clean in February with the cinders down, and no plate, not a dealer tag, not a temporary in the back glass, not even a bracket with the screws still in it, just paint. I noticed the car first. I always have. Then somebody knocked, and I went down the inside stairs in my socks and opened the door. 2 men in black suits. It was overcast that morning, that low gray ceiling we get here from November to April, where the light is the same at 10 as it is at 3, and both of them had sunglasses on. Mr. Chambliss, the one in front, said, "Yeah," I said, and then they smiled. They did it one after the other. Not together. The one in front went first, and the one behind came about half a second later, working off a signal, and it was the same smile on both. Wide as a face will go. Closed mouth the whole way, no teeth, corners up almost to the sunglasses, and it stayed. That's what I keep. A smile is a thing that happens and then quits happening, a second and a half in a doorway between men who don't know each other. Theirs went up and stopped moving and was still exactly like that a good while later. "Just checking in," the one in front said. "Making sure you've been feeling safe lately." I said, "Safe." "Safe," he said. "Any concerns about your safety? Any unusual activity in the area? Sometimes people see things at night out on these roads, and they don't know who to tell." "Who are you with?" I said. "We're just checking in," he said. "I've been pulling up on people at the side of the road for 12 years, and what a man learns to read out there is not whether the guy's lying, it's whether he's performing. A drunk isn't performing, a drunk is doing his level best. A guy about to tell me a deer put his wife's Explorer into a pole is lying, but he's scrambling, and I can watch him build it in real time, and it's almost sad. Performing is a man doing an impression of a man in a situation. These two were doing an impression. Every part of it sat a half-inch off the place a real thing sits. The pause before the answer was the same length both times. When the one in front said the word safety, he leaned on it the way an actor leans on a word in a commercial. His hands cycled out in front of him, and then down at his sides and out in front of him again, like a man who'd been given the positions and no reason for any of them. And they had the sunglasses on a day without a shadow anywhere in the county. They're doing a bit. That was the thought I had standing in my socks on my own stairs. Not that they were dangerous. That they were doing a bit and doing it badly, the way a man in a rented uniform stands wrong in it, and that whatever the bit was for, it wasn't for me, because a bit that bad couldn't be for anybody. The one in front said, "Have you been approached by anyone recently?" And then a car turned onto Bergen and came up the block behind them, and both their heads went at the same time. Brown Oldsmobile. Bondo patch on the right rear quarter. Primered and never painted. Ordell pulled in 6 feet off the Crown Vic's back bumper and shut it off and did not get out. He sat with his hands on the wheel and his reading glasses hanging on their cord and looked at the back of their heads through his windshield. The one in front had his mouth open on the next word. He had it started, an A sound, and he did not finish it. He turned and went down my steps and got in the passenger side, and the other went around the front, and they pulled off the curb and took the left at the stop sign without coming to a stop. The smiles were still on, both of them, through the glass, going up the street. Nobody had taken them off. Ordell got out then. He came up the walk in the gray suit, still wrong through the shoulders, and stood on the bottom step with his hands in his coat pockets, and watched the corner a good 10 seconds after there was nothing left to watch. "Who the hell was that?" I said. He took his glasses off the cord and cleaned them on the end of his tie and put them back. "That's not us," he said. "That's what's left of us." I said, "That isn't an answer." He said, "No, it isn't." Then he looked up at me on the top step and said, "Did they give you anything? Paper? Card? Anything at all?" "No." "Did you shake either one of them by the hand?" "No." Ordell nodded once, and something went out of his shoulders that I hadn't noticed was in them. "Don't," he said. "If they come back and one of them puts a hand out, you keep yours where it is. And if that makes you feel like a rude son of a bitch, then be a rude son of a bitch. And if either one of them ever gets your name out of your own mouth, you call me before you do anything else." I said, "I don't have your number." He said, "You will." Then he said, "Thursday, 11 at night, I'll come by the shop. It's a renewal out on Ridge Road, and it's nothing. You'll be home by 1. And I said no. I said it out loud on my own front steps, and I meant it. I told him I don't know what happened out on that road, and I don't want to know, and I'm not doing it again. I told him about the money and told him I'd give it back, and even saying that I was thinking about the payment clearing on the 15th and the $40 left in the account after, which there has not been in 3 years. He didn't argue. That's the part. He stood on the bottom step and let me finish and never said one word against any of it. No pitch. He waited until I ran out, the way a man waits out a dog on a chain. Then he said, 11 o'clock. Wear a coat. We'll be standing. And I said, "You're not listening. I'm out." And Ordell Mace looked at me for a second, and there was something on his face I didn't have a name for yet. "Son," he said, "you're not in a thing you can be out of." He went down the walk and got in the Oldsmobile. I stood there and yelled after him that I never signed anything. He had the door open with one foot in, and he stopped and set it over the roof, with no weight on it at all, the way a man says the tire shop closes at 5. "You didn't have to," he said. "I did." He came back Thursday, the way he said he would. I had the corner booth at the anthracite, and I dragged the chair around off the two-top so he could sit on the end, because he was an old man and those booth benches are low and hard on the hip. 3 in the morning. 2 coffees already on the table, one for him, cream and sugar set out beside it because I didn't know how he took it. He came in with his coat buttoned to the throat and his reading glasses hanging on the cord, and he stopped at the end of the table and looked at that chair the way you look at a dog you haven't decided about yet. Then he sat in the next booth over, facing the other way, and talked to me across the divider like 2 men waiting on the same bus. "Sit anywhere you want," he said. "Not there. It's a chair, Ordell. It's a chair you pulled out." I sat there a second feeling stupid the way you feel stupid when a rule you never heard of has already been broken. Then I moved to his booth and slid in across from him, and he didn't say anything about that, so I figured I'd guessed right. Behind the counter, Deb had the radio low on the oldie station out of Hazleton, and the grill man was scraping the flat top, that long, slow scrape that means nothing's cooking. "Anybody sets a thing out for you, that's an offer," he said. "A chair is an offer. A glass of water is an offer. And I've seen a man go into terms over a glass of water. Over water. Over water in August. From a woman who was grateful," he said. The gratitude was the expensive part. Deb came over with the pot. She's been there since I was in high school, and she calls every man in the county Han. She topped me off and reached across for his cup, and his hand was already flat over the mouth of it, palm down, fingers spread. She poured a little anyway before she caught herself, because at 3 in the morning the body's faster than the eye, and it ran over the back of his hand and off onto the saucer. He didn't move. Didn't pull it back. Didn't shake it off. He held it there while she said, "Sorry, hon," twice, and went for a rag, and only when she'd taken the pot away did he lift his hand and set it in his lap. The skin across 2 of his knuckles was going red. "Jesus," I said. "Bring him the check when he wants it," he said to Deb. "I'm not having anything." She went. He looked at his hand once, and then he stopped looking at it. "You could have said no," I said. "I did say no. Twice tonight already, before you got here, to a man in the lot who wanted to give me directions." He took the glasses off the cord and cleaned them on his tie and hung them back without ever putting them on. Saying no is the whole of it. Every day. To everything. You'd be surprised what people try to hand you. I cracked my 2 dead fingers against my palm. They still make the noise, and there's no knuckle left in there to make it, and I don't hear it anymore unless somebody else does. "All right," I said. "Then tell me what it is I'm not supposed to accept things during." He turned his empty cup right side up. A cup face down on a saucer is a message to a waitress, and he didn't want to send one. "There are parties in the world that are owed," he said. "That's the beginning, and it's most of the middle, too. We call them interested parties. You'll want a bigger word for them, and I'd ask you not to reach for it." "Owed what?" "Depends what they hold. There's one under the hill outside your town that's had that seam since before anybody thought to dig at it. and it's been mowed on and off for 160 years by people who were mostly trying to get through a winter. He put his hands flat on the table, small hands, nails cut short and square, the way a man cuts them when he used to work with them. The men I came up with called that one kettle. Not a name, a label on a folder. A kettle bottom, I said, the stump thing, in the roof. His face did something small, not a smile. Your people were miners, my grandfather. Kessler number 3, till the water came in. Then you already know more than most of them I break in, he said. Then you know it lets go without one sound, he said. No crack, no dust first. It isn't there, and then it's on you. We'll get to why that's the name, and I'd as soon it wasn't tonight. Deb went by with plates for the 2 truckers at the counter. Eggs and scrapple, and I remember being hungry and then not being hungry. Somebody takes terms with one of these parties, I said. Like Marta Dietz. Somebody takes terms. That makes them a signatory. Could be a person, could be a family, could be a stretch of road. There's a mile of Route 924 that's a signatory, and has been since the trolley. He said it the way a man tells you where the fuse box is. Everybody who isn't a signatory is a writer, doing a piece of somebody's errand and calling it a job. Most of the people who ever lived were writers. And you, I'm nothing. That's the point of me. That's not an answer. It's the only one there is. The outfit doesn't have a name because a name is a handle, and a handle is a claim, and the whole of what I am is a man with no claim, standing where he can see. He tugged the lapel of that gray coat between 2 fingers, cheap fabric sitting wrong across his shoulders. I had noticed it the first night and figured him for a man who'd shrunk out of a good suit. You know why it's this color? It's a cheap suit. It's the color of no claim, he said. Black is the color of ownership. That's why the ones at your door wear it. Gray tells the room I'm on nobody's side and I'm not taking anything out of here when I go. There's no badge on it because a badge is a claim too. Then what do? You stand there. I stand there, he said, at arm's length, and I write it down. That's it. That's it. And it's the only thing keeping it honest. He leaned in about 2 inches, which, for him, was leaning in. A term between a party like that and a signatory isn't binding unless a neutral body is present when it's struck, close enough to be part of the room, far enough to not be part of the deal. No witness, no limit, and with no limit, the party doesn't take what it's owed. It takes what it wants. There's a difference, and the difference is usually everybody in the house. Behind the wall, the ice machine dumped, and I about came out of the seat. So the woman on Old Furnace, I said. If I hadn't stood there. You'd have towed the car in the morning, he said, and in about a week somebody would have gone in that house on a welfare check. I sat with that. You get a call, and you get there, and inside 2 seconds you know you're not pulling anybody out, you're waiting on the corner. It isn't fear. It's a quiet dropping through you, floor by floor. I had that at a Formica table with a coffee going cold. Thursday, I said. Thursday. I already told you I'm not doing it again. You did, he said, and he sounded like a man agreeing about the weather. So what happens if I don't show? Say I take Nell to the movies in Bly and I turn the phone off. Wardell took a piece of hard candy out of his coat pocket. Butterscotch, gold wrapper, the kind that used to sit in a dish at my aunt's. He set it in front of him and turned it over with 1 finger and did not open it. He does that. 31 years carrying candy he isn't allowed to eat, because it was handed to him once and he can't take it and can't give it away, so he carries it. 1984, he said. There was a man named Hodge. Not my crew, but I knew him to talk to. He was on the sheet for us striking out past Dunlow on a Wednesday night, and he sat down in his kitchen on Bell Street instead and stayed there. And they took more than they were owed. Out there, yes. He turned the butterscotch over again. That's not the part I'd tell you if I only had the one part. Then what is? The book doesn't record where a witness was supposed to be. It records where he is. Hodge was on the sheet, so the sheet had him. And when it was struck out on that road with nobody at arm's length, what got written down was the room the witness was standing in. I didn't say anything. His kitchen, Wardell said. His wife was at the sink. His boy was working a paper route book at the table. The house is still up. Second one past the church. Blue shingle. Nobody's lived in it since '84, and the county still carries it as occupied, because the county's paperwork is downstream of ours, and it never got the correction. Deb dropped my check face down by my elbow and said, "Take your time, hon," and went. I reached for it, and Ordell put one finger on it and slid it back to my side of the table. "You don't pay for me," he said. "I don't pay for you. You didn't have anything." She poured half a cup. He was already counting change out of a snap purse, an old man's purse, laying it in a line on the formica. Quarters and dimes and 2 pennies. Exact, and no tip on it, and he saw me see that. "The tip's mine to give, and I'll give it up at the register where it's a payment and not a present." He stood and buttoned his coat. "Every man in this building is in somebody's debt and doesn't know it," he said. "The 2 that aren't are me, and, since Tuesday, in the small way you don't understand yet, you." He left the butterscotch on the table. His car was that brown Oldsmobile, older, with the Bondo patch on the right rear quarter, the kind of car that's invisible in this county. Through the window I watched him stop in the middle of the lot with the door open and take a little cloth-bound book out of his inside pocket and write something in it standing up in the cold and close it. Nothing had happened out there. I watched the whole lot the whole time. Nothing happened out there at all. 2 nights after the diner, he put me in his car and we went out Ridge Road. The chair was already out in the yard when we got there, which told me they knew what time it was better than I did. Ridge Road, 20 minutes north and east of Dunlow, up out of the valley where the ground gets good for about 4 farms and then gives up again. Kishbaugh Place. Bank barn with the ramp side to the road. A Silverado with the rocker panel gone to lace. A Ford tractor under a lean-to with a tarp over the seat. A dog on a run wire watched us come up the drive and did not bark, and that dog stayed at the far end of that wire the whole time we were on the property. 4 in the morning. Frost on the truck glass and none on the grass, which I noticed and put down to the slope. It was a kitchen chair, wood with a vinyl seat, one of a set. It sat in the middle of the dooryard next to the wellhead, a concrete ring about knee-high with a plank cover on it, and one of the old green pitcher pumps bolted to the plank, painted a lot of times. "Renewal," Ordell said. "Nothing to it. You'll be bored, and I want you bored." Most of this work is a man in a cheap coat standing in a yard while the same thing that happened in 1931 happens again. That's it. It's paperwork. The office is just out here. The porch light came on and the old man came out. Emery Kishbaugh, 78, Carhartt bibs over pajama pants, rubber boots with the tops flopped down. He had his hair combed. That's what I never got past. 4 in the morning in his own dooryard, and he'd wet his hair and combed it. He didn't say hello. He said, "She's a little late coming on. I run the pump some yesterday, so..." "That's fine," Ordell said. Behind him a woman was washing something at the kitchen sink with her back to the glass. Daughter-in-law, I found out after. Name of Beth Ann. She never turned around one time. She washed the same pan the whole way through it. Ordell put me where he wanted me, with 2 fingers on my sleeve. Arm's length off the old man's left. Close enough that if I put my hand out, I'd have touched his shoulder. "Not closer," Ordell said. "Closer, and you're a party to it. Not farther. Farther, and you weren't there. There's no third thing. How do I know if I'm at arm's length? Put your arm out." So I stood in a farmyard in October with my arm out like a man checking for rain, and then I let it down. Emery sat in the chair and put his hands on his knees. He said some words. It wasn't a chant and it wasn't a prayer, and if I make it sound like either one, I'm lying. It was the way a man says grace at a table where grace has been said 9,000 times. Half swallowed, worn round at the edges. Something about water and the use of it, something about the ground under his place and what's under that, a part in the middle where he named the years, and then, and I'll hold to it same as him, and I took him to mean his father. Then he stopped and sat there with his hands on his knees. The temperature came up. That's the flat way to say it. October, 4 in the morning, and the cold went out of the ground under my boots the way heat comes up off blacktop in July. The concrete ring of the well went dark on top all at once, the way concrete does when it's wet. It wasn't wet. Down under the yard somewhere, a good way down, A big door closed. That's the only way I know to put it. Not a slam, and not a bang. Somebody very large closing a very heavy door in a way that says he doesn't want to disturb anybody, and holding the knob turned till it's shut so the latch doesn't click. Ordell had the book open on his forearm, and he was writing. I gotta look at the pen this time. Black plastic barrel. The kind they used to give away at banks. What came out of it didn't shine. Ink shines when it's fresh. Even cheap ink. A wet line on the paper for a second before it takes. This went into the page like water into dry dirt, and by the time his hand moved on, there was nothing there but the letters. I didn't blink. I made a project out of it, and my eyes were running by the end, and I did not blink. It took about as long as it takes to write out a check. Then the ground under my boots was ground again, and Emery Kishbaugh got up and worked the pitcher pump 4 or 5 strokes, and it coughed and brought up water, and he cupped a hand under it and drank out of his palm and said, "Yep, that was the whole thing. Yep." He walked past me toward the house, and he said over his shoulder, "There's coffee if yous want." She made a pot. And I said, "Yeah, that'd be good, thanks," because I'd been standing in the cold for an hour and I'm a human being. Ordell didn't grab me. He said my name once, the way you'd say it across a shop floor, and I heard what I'd said and stood there with my mouth open like a man who'd stepped off a curb he didn't know was there. "No, thank you," I said. "We're all right." Emery shrugged. He was already at the steps. The kitchen door was open, and Beth Ann was standing there with a dish towel, and she said, "Thank yous for coming out. We appreciate it. We surely do." Ordell was gone, not running. He turned on his heel about halfway through the word thank, and he walked out toward the drive with his coat flapping, and he was 30 feet away before she finished the sentence, and she looked at me like I ought to explain him, and I had nothing. I went in. That's the part I'd take back, and not because anything happened. Nothing happened. She'd set out nut roll cut in slices on a paper towel, and I didn't touch it, and she didn't push it. The coffee maker gurgled. There was a school bus schedule on the refrigerator under a heating oil magnet and a kid's drawing of a horse next to it. I went in because I wanted to see what kind of house does this. The answer is that kind. A clean kitchen with a linoleum floor and a laundry basket on a chair. On my way back out, I put my hand on the door frame to step down, the way you do, and my thumb went over something and I looked at it. Somebody had cut a line into that jamb with a knife. A short horizontal cut, about as long as your thumb, deep enough to go through the paint into the wood, and under it, scratched small, a year. There was another one about a foot lower, another one above. They went up and down that frame from the height of my hip to over my head, 30 of them anyway, all cut the same way by different hands, the years scratched under them in the same short strokes. 1922, near the top. 1931 under that. The paint in the old cuts was that green they used to use in kitchens, then a cream, then the white it is now. It's a height chart. That's what your head does with it. Every house has one of those in a doorway somewhere, a name and a date and a pencil line. My head said height chart, and I stood there with my hand on the frame and let it be one for about 4 seconds, which is how long it took me to work out that the marks were in the wrong order. They didn't climb, they didn't go up as the years went on the way a kid goes up. They went where they wanted. Up a foot, down 8 inches, up 2, and the newest cut, the one with no paint in it at all, pale wood, edges still sharp. The year under it, not this year but next, was down low, down by my knee. Beth Ann was at the sink again. Down the hall, a little girl stood in a bedroom doorway in a nightgown with a horse on it, 6 years old maybe, hair flat on one side from the pillow, looking at me the way kids look at a man in their house at 4 a.m. She came up the hall and stopped in the kitchen door and leaned her shoulder on that frame the way kids do. The top of her head was at the pail cut, not near it, at it. "Junie bed," Beth Ann said, without turning around. I counted them going down the driveway, and I counted them again in the truck. 31 cuts in that wood, and the 32nd already made. Ordell was in the passenger seat with his hands in his lap looking straight out the windshield at the barn. "Bored?" he said. The next one was not a renewal. The porch light was off and the television was on, and that combination told me somebody in that house had thought about it. Half double on Wyoming Street in Bly. Up the hill behind the fire company, the side with the aluminum awning over the front step. 9 at night on a Monday. A blue Focus in the alley behind it with a contractor bag taped over the back window where the glass had gone, and that bag going in and out with the wind like it was breathing. Out back, the ring of dead yellow grass where an above-ground pool had stood until somebody took it down for the year. Ordell parked the Oldsmobile 2 doors up and shut it off, and we sat a minute. Collection, he said. Term struck 2017. They're up. What she owe, what she agreed to. He took the glasses off the cord and cleaned them and hung them back without putting them on. You're going to want to help her. All right. I'm telling you out here where it costs nothing, because in there it'll cost everything. She doesn't need help. She needs a witness. That's 2 different men, and only one of them's allowed in the room. Her name was Charlene Beck. Mid-30s, Navy scrubs, a lanyard still around her neck from the dental office up on Main, which meant she'd been home 4 hours and hadn't taken it off. I know that feeling. I've slept in my boots. Her hands were on the edge of the door, and I noticed them first, because I always notice hands. It's how you tell if a guy at a wreck is going into shock. There was a fabric band-aid wrapped around her right thumb, gone gray at the edge. The nails on that hand were bitten down past the quick, and the other hand was fine. She'd been working the one hand for a while. You're early, she said. No, ma'am, Ordell said. It's 20 till. I know what time it is. She stepped back to let us in, and then she said, over her shoulder, into the front room, in a completely different voice, a bright one, Bud, go on upstairs. These are the guys about the car. The house smelled like fabric softener and something with hamburger in it from earlier. There was a card table in the front room with a 9-year-old's homework on it, a folder with a bald eagle on the cover, a pencil chewed down to the metal, a blanket wadded on the couch where somebody had been laying. The boy came around the kitchen doorway. 9 years old. Buzz cut grown out to about an inch. Ears he hadn't caught up to yet. Basketball shorts and a Little League shirt with Bly Hose Company across the front. Nell is 9. That was my first thought and not my second, and I'd rather be honest about it. Nell is 9 and her front tooth came in crooked, and she keeps the little silica packets out of shoe boxes in an Altoids tin because she thinks they're illegal. Are you the guys that came about the car? The boy said. Bud, Charlene said, because the window's plastic now, and Denny said that's not even legal. Upstairs. He went. Took the stairs 2 at a time the way they do, and 4 steps up he hung over the rail and said, Mom, do I still got to do the map thing? And she said yes. And he said, that's so unfair, and went the rest of the way. A door shut. The ceiling made that sound a ceiling makes when a kid flops on a bed. Charlene Beck stood in her own front room with her hands at her sides. Where do you want me? She said. Ordell put me at arm's length off her left, back a half step, the corner of the card table against my thigh. He stood on her right the same distance, and took the book out of his coat. Gray cloth, no writing on the front, the corners gone soft the way a paperback goes in a back pocket. Say what you agreed, he said. She said it the way you'd read your own address off a form. July of 2017. A woman at work had told her about a woman that woman's mother knew. Her boy was 8 months into it. They'd been down to Danville twice, and the last time she'd been told it was in his marrow and there wasn't much more. So she drove up on the hill, on the Dunlow Road, in the dark, not knowing what she was doing, and said out loud that they could have anything. She said that part twice. Anything. Take anything. And she got told back that they didn't want anything, they wanted the one thing. And she said fine, and she said what it was out loud, and it was written down, and there was a man in a gray coat off to her left the whole night that she never got a look at. And you were told the term, Ordell said. 9 years. You were told what it would be at the end of 9 years. Yes. You want to say it, or should I read it? Her hands came up then. She put them on the back of the kitchen chair, pulled up to the card table, one on each side of the top rail, and her knuckles went, the color knuckles go, and that was the only place in her whole body any of it showed. Her face did nothing, just those 2 hands on the back of that chair like she was on a boat, "I'll say it," she said. "I have hauled people out of cars. I had a guy hold my wrist in a ditch off Interstate 80 and say his daughter's name over and over so I'd remember it, and I remember it. So I've been around it, and I still tried to step forward, and I don't know what I thought I was going to do. Ordell's arm came across my chest. He kept his eyes on her and the book and put his forearm out and locked it, and I hit it and it did not move, and that arm was harder than a 60-something's arm has any business being. He never once looked at me. The room got warm, up through the carpet and the plywood and whatever's under 100-year-old half-double in this town. Then the smell came, wet pennies and cold ash, and I have not been able to stand in a rained-on parking lot since without something in me going still. Somewhere a long way down, a big door was closed with a lot of care. Charlene Beck said her son's name. She said it once, out loud, in her own front room with the television still going behind her. It was a plain name. There are 4 of them in every grade of every school in this county. Ordell wrote. I watched the pen go and the letters sink in, and I did not blink, and I want it on the record that the one thing I did right in that house was not blink. And when he lifted the pen off the page, she stopped. Her mouth was still open a little on the end of it, the way a mouth is after a word, and it stayed that way about a second longer than a mouth does, and then it closed. Her eyes went around the room, past me, to the stairs, to the folder with the eagle on it. No panic in it. It was the face of a woman who has walked into a room and cannot think what she came in for. She said, "Where's?" That's all. Where's? And nothing after it. And her mouth worked once. She looked up at the ceiling. The kid was up there. You could hear the bed springs. Her hands came off the back of that chair and went out in front of her, palms up, that empty gesture people make. And I watched a woman try 3 times to call up the stairs to her own son and come up with air. Then she stopped trying, and she took her hands and straightened the papers on the card table, squared them up, put the pencil on top, lined up with the edge. That was it. That's the whole collection. Ordell closed the book and put it in his coat. Terms are honored, he said. Clean, both sides. It's on the sheet. She nodded at him. She had no idea what he'd said. She was looking at the stairs. We went out. I got as far as the gravel strip in the alley by the Focus with the bag over the window going in and out, and I put my hand on the fender and got rid of everything I'd had since noon. Ordell waited. He stood about 6 feet off, with his hands in his coat pockets, and he did not come over, and he did not put a hand on my back, and he did not say one word until I was done, and had spit and straightened up. There's a spigot on the side of the house, he said. Don't use it. I laughed. It came out sideways, and it wasn't a laugh. He's still up there, I said. He's still up there. He's fine. He's just laying up there. He'll be fine, Ordell said. He'll grow up and get his height and play ball for the fire company and wreck a car and be all right. He looked back at the house. The porch light was still off, and the blue of the television was moving on the ceiling of that front room. She'll feed him. She'll get his coat on him in the morning. She'll never once in her life be able to lay hold of him with anything. She's got a boy in her house that she cannot pick out of a crowd. That's what she paid. That's what she offered. On that hill she offered anything, and she got asked for a name, and she was so glad it wasn't the boy that she said yes fast. He started for the car. It's not the worst set of terms I've stood for. It's not close. That's the part that'll keep you up, so I'd rather you heard it out here than worked it out at 3 a.m. by yourself. I stayed by the Focus another minute, with my mouth tasting like a handful of change. What was it? I said. The name. She said it, and I heard her say it, and it's gone out of me too. Ordell had the door open. The dome light in that Oldsmobile is the yellow they don't make anymore, and it made him look every year he had. I wrote it down not 4 minutes ago in my own hand, he said, and I could not tell you one letter of it. He got in. Up the hill a screen door went, and a dog started, and quit. I called Shauna at 6 a.m. with the truck running, because the heater in my apartment had been on the landlord's list since February, and the cab got warm faster. She picked up on the 4th ring. She has answered a phone for a living for 11 years, dispatched for an ambulance outfit in Hazleton, so even at her own kitchen table her hello comes out square and ready for whatever's on the other end of it. It's me, I said. Is she okay? She's fine. Nell's fine. A cabinet shut on her end. She was making coffee, and she was going to go on making it while she talked to me, because that is how it is now, and I don't hold it against her. I had 6 or 7 good years of being the reason she stopped what she was doing. I used them all up. I'm in trouble, I said. That came out clean. Every word of it in order. Then I went to say the rest. I had it built. I built it in the gravel at the shop the night before with my hands on my knees, and I carried it the whole drive home the way a man carries a phone number from the truck to the kitchen. Last night, in Bly, a woman named Charlene who owed on something, a little man in a gray suit with his reading glasses hanging on a cord. What I stood there and let happen with my hands in my coat pockets. Air came up out of my chest and went out through my mouth, and there was nothing riding on it. It was not a man losing his nerve. I have lost my nerve, and I know what that is from the inside. Losing my nerve is when the sentence is sitting right there, and I decide not to spend it. This was a starter turning over on a truck with no fuel in the line. All the right motion, jaw doing its part, breath moving out past my teeth. Nothing caught. Russ. Yeah. Are you drinking? No, because you sound like it. I'm not drinking. I tried it again. I got as far as the first sound of the word Bly, and my throat did a thing it has never done, which was nothing at all. It didn't close. It didn't stick. There was no fight in it. The word just was not where I had left it. Is it money? She said. Yeah, I said, and that came out easy as spit, because it was true and because it was allowed. So I tested the fence while I had her. I said the truck note was $480, and I was a month out from Gary knowing. Came out clean. Then I said, last night I was standing in a driveway on Ferndale and Bly, and there was a woman. The sentence stopped the way a chain stops when it comes tight. Shauna waited. She is good at waiting. It is most of her job. You're tired, she said. You work nights and you eat out of a cooler and you're 40. 39. You're 40 in June. She said something to Nell that wasn't for me. Sock drawer, something. Then she came back. Don't bring this to the weekend, whatever it is. She's been counting days on the calendar in the hall. I won't. Russ. A pause with a coffee maker in it. Call Bly Manor. They rang here again. They still have this number, and I don't know why they still have this number. I said I would. And she hung up, and I sat there in the lot with the defroster going, and my 2 dead fingers cracked against my palm, which they still do, which they should not be able to do. Anyhow, I drove up to the anthracite in Bly, because it was open, and because there was no reason to be in my apartment. Bev put a cup down in front of me without asking, and I got a pen off her, a Bic with the cap chewed flat, and I took the napkins out of the dispenser and wrote it down. That worked. That worked fine. I write like a man filling out a tow ticket, all block capitals, and I filled 2 napkins front and back, address what the woman said and what the little man said and what I did with my hands, which was nothing. I read it back twice, with the sugar caddy holding the corner down, and it was all there, and I remember thinking that if I went off Route 924 that night, it would at least be in the world. I folded them into quarters and put them in the coat pocket, the left one, the cuff with the burn hole in it. Thursday I worked, and it was the best night I'd had in a month, because a wrecked truck in a ditch means what it looks like it means. Friday morning I went into the pocket for the napkins. They were there, folded in quarters the way I fold. Blank on both sides, all 4 faces, not a mark, not a dent in the paper where a pen had pressed. Here is the part I keep going back over. I remember the pen, I remember the chewed cap and the sugar caddy and Bev topping me off without looking, and I remember reading it back and being satisfied. I cannot name one word that was on those napkins, not the address, not her name, and I knew her name. I had heard it said out loud in that driveway. So I did it again under the pole lamp at the shop with a Sharpie on the back of a tow ticket, and I watched the pen the whole time. Ink came out. Words went on the paper in that fat black ink, and I read them, and I put the ticket in the glove box and drove 9 minutes to the Turkey Hill and opened the glove box in the lot. The ticket was there. The ticket was clean. I thought about leaving myself a message on my own machine, and I didn't. because I was more afraid of what wouldn't be on it. Saturday, I picked up Nell. I got there 20 minutes early and sat at the curb like a man casing the place. Shauna came out on the step in her scrubs and did the 2-second inspection she does, and I must have passed because she went back in. Nell came down the walk with her backpack on both shoulders and something held up between 2 fingers before she was even at the truck. "Do not eat," she said. "It says it right on it." Little white packet out of a boot box. She has close to 40 of them in a shoebox at her mother's. And she is 9, and she believes with her whole chest that she is holding something she is not supposed to have, and I have never told her different. She wanted the reservoir. She always wants the reservoir. There is nothing out there in November but low water and a concrete ramp with a green algae line a foot above the surface. I watched her the whole time. I have watched weather come over that ridge for 20 years, and I know the look of it right before it turns. That is how I watched my kid throw rocks at a reservoir. I knew where she was in feet. Not in the general sense, in feet. The way a man knows where his boom is when he is swinging a car over a guardrail. 16 feet, 9 feet, 22 feet, and moving out along the ramp where the algae was. A maroon Grand Am pulled in and parked nose out, and I had the bad wheel bearing on it before I had one thing about the man driving it, and I moved, so I was standing between that car and her without deciding to. At some point, I noticed I was standing at arm's length from my own daughter. Exactly that. Close enough to touch, and no closer. My elbow locked at the length it locks at when Ordell puts me somewhere. Not that. Not with her. I stepped in and put my hand on her head, and she ducked out from under it, which is what she does now, and I let it go. I also noticed I had not said her name. Not that morning, not at the door, not in the truck. Kiddo, kid, hey, all day Saturday, and Thursday too, and I could not have said when the last time was. It had come off me the way a habit comes off, quiet on its own while I was busy. Across the water, a mile and change, the bank sat there being the biggest thing in the county. 140 feet of coal dirt with a fire in it that has been going since before my mother got married. Snow doesn't lie on it. Nothing takes on that ground for a quarter-mile out. Anybody around here knows that much. It's on the historical sign at the pull-off with the paint peeling off it. There was a good wind that afternoon. It had the water up in whitecaps, and it was pushing the geese sideways on the ramp. The smoke came up off the top of that bank straight as a plumb line. I kept checking it. Not looking at it. Checking it. The way a man checks a mirror on a downgrade. "It's ugly," Nell said, when she caught where I was looking. "Yeah, why doesn't the snow stay on it? Fire's underneath. Warms the ground." She thought about that with her thumbnail and the crooked tooth, which is a thing I have asked her not to do about 400 times. "You keep looking at it," she said. "Why do you keep looking at it?" 2 nights after she went back to her mother's, he called me out at 3 in the morning. Ordell had me leave the car at the gate on Blackwater Hollow, and we walked in, which was about 9 minutes at his pace. 4 in the morning, no moon worth talking about, cold enough that the puddles in the ruts had lids on them. He went ahead of me with his hands behind his back like a man walking a fence line on his own property. The book was in his left coat pocket, and the pen was in his shirt pocket, which is where it lives. "Terms on this one predate the state," he said. "That's not a figure of speech. There was no state. Who's it with?" "Not ours. Older ground than ours, and further down. It still needs a body standing at arm's length, which is the whole trade. That's why they can't get rid of us, and why they don't have to like us." "Does it have a name?" "It has about 9, and none of them are its own. The men before me put it in the book as the farrier on account of the feet. That's not a name. That's a thing to write in a box. They took the coal off that hill in the 50s with a shovel the size of a house and left a hole 40 feet deep and 200 across, and it filled with groundwater. And the water is green in a way that has nothing to do with plants. The benches are still cut into the walls like stairs for somebody 30 feet tall. Kids swim in it every July, and one of them didn't come up in 1986, and they still swim in it. Ordell put me on the second bench down. on the dry side, and stood me on a spot he picked with his shoe. "It cannot say anything new," he said. "Everything that comes out of it somebody said first, and it kept it. Don't answer it like it's talking to you unless I tell you it is." "What does that mean?" "Kept it. Means what it sounds like." He got the glasses up on his nose. "And if it starts thanking you, you turn around and walk. You don't let it get to the end of that sentence." Not one word past the front of it. Then the water went up. Not a splash. The middle of that pit rose in a low hill, about the size of a car roof, no break in the surface, no ring going out, like something turned over underneath a bedsheet. Then it did break off to the left of where I was watching, 20 feet from where the hill had been, which is a thing about size I did not want to work out, and worked out anyway. The sound of it standing up is the part I go back to. Not a roar, nothing like that. It was the sound of a boot coming out of clay mud, held out and drawn long, 10 or 12 seconds of it, and underneath that a click. One click, big and dry, the way a knuckle sounds if the knuckle was in a barn. The water came off it slower than water comes off things. It hung and ran in ropes, long past when it should have been done running, and it was still running off the low parts of it when we left. A foreleg came down on the bench below mine. It was not a hoof, and it was not a foot. It was split and wide as a dinner plate, and it set down the way a man sets down a jack, feeling for the spot before he puts weight on it. The hair on the shoulder was laid flat and wet, the color a deer goes in November, and the shoulder was at a height that had nothing to do with the deer. The joint above the split part bent the wrong way for a horse, and the wrong way for a man both, and it stopped at an angle in between and held there. It smelled like the pit and like iron, and under that like a barn that has had animals in it for a long time. There was a head. It was up against the sky where the ridgeline was, and I made a decision about how much of it to look at. Stay on the shoulder. I kept my eyes on the top of that shoulder for 11 minutes, and I am not going to pretend it was courage. The neck went up past where I expected the neck to be over with. That is all I will say. I saw the teeth once when it spoke, and they were flat, the teeth of a thing that eats grass, set in a jaw too long for the job. It stopped where it stopped, and it did not come any closer. That is the part nobody would believe. It held itself at a distance, and after a minute I understood it was measuring the same arm's length Ordell measures. It knew the rules. It was keeping them better than I was. "Morning," it said. A man's voice. Middle-aged, local, the flat Schuylkill County sound, the voice of somebody who has said good morning to a lot of people from inside a truck. "Morning," Ordell said, and opened the book. I don't know what I thought was going to happen out there, not that. Ordell read the terms off the page, in the voice of a man reading a meter. The herd on the north end of the county stays cold to a number. Sickness stays out of the herd, which keeps it out of a couple of other things I did not follow. Whatever is owed for that is paid the way it has been paid, and the ground stands good for it. Then language about the boundary, which ran along the Blackwater and up to the second bench of the pit and did not include the water. That is agreeable to me, it said. A different voice this time. A woman, older than Ordell, with an accent I have only ever heard out of people born before the radio, the kind of voice that says "wash for wash." Ordell wrote, "The pen doesn't shine and it doesn't scratch. The line goes down and then it goes into the page, and there is no watching that twice. Don't blink," he said. I didn't. I got a good long stretch out of it that night. My eyes ran and I let them run. There was no sound underneath us. On Ridge Road and in that driveway in Bly there had been that big door closing somewhere down below, polite, like a man shutting a door on a room where somebody's sleeping. Out there, nothing. I had stood 2 of these, and I had already started expecting it, and its absence was the only thing on that whole bench that scared me in a way I could name. Partway through it shifted its weight and cocked one back leg the way a horse does when it rests, and held it there and waited on the paperwork. I know how that sounds. It was doing its job. It had come up out of that water at 4 a.m. to sign for the same thing it has signed for since before there was a Pennsylvania, and it stood patient while a little man in a cheap gray suit found the right line. And I half liked it. I want that on the record, because of everything that came after. Then it looked at me. "Well, who's this now?" it said in a young woman's voice, and the sentence had the flat squeeze sound of a phone speaker on it. It had gotten that one off a phone. Somebody had set it into a phone within earshot of a flooded strip pit in the last 5 years, and it had kept it. "He's on the sheet," Ordell said. It held still. Something in it took a breath, or did whatever it does instead. "I don't think I can do this part," it said. That was Ordell's voice. Same shape in the mouth, same little hitch he puts in front of a hard sentence. But young, 30 years young, a man's voice before the dust got into it, and it had a thing in it I have never once heard out of Ordell Mace, which was fear with no floor under it. His pen stopped on the page and sat there. He did not look up, and his face did not do anything at all. Then he wrote the last of it out and closed the book. "Terms are renewed and clean," Ordell said. "Witnessed. Much obliged to you both. That's real." He had me by the elbow before the fourth word. Old man's voice it was using. Courtly. Some farmer dead 60 years, and Ordell had my sleeve in his fist, and he was walking me up the bench toward the ruts, and I went, because his hand was stronger than his size has any business being, and because I had been told. Behind us, the water was still coming off it. I could hear it running back down into the pit in that long, unhurried way, and I could hear the split feet moving on the bench, taking its time about going back in. We got to the gate. Ordell was ahead of me, with the keys already out. The last one came across the water flat, and clear the way sound carries over water at 4 in the morning. "Okay, put mine down instead." A boy's voice. 19, maybe. That age where it has already dropped, but it goes thin at the end of a sentence when the kid is trying to sound sure of himself and isn't. Something in my chest went over sideways, the way a load shifts on a deck in a corner taken too hot, and I put it down to the hour and the walk and not having eaten since Friday. "Who was that?" I said. Ordell stood at the driver's door of that brown Oldsmobile with the key in his hand, and looked back down the ruts at the water for longer than a man needs to look at anything. "Get in the car," he said. The water hadn't moved. 8 days after the pit, there was a delivery to stand for. We waited at the reservoir on the Bly side, which meant 25 minutes around the north end of the water, to stand on gravel I could have thrown a rock at from the Dunlow boat ramp. 1 in the morning. Ordell had the book open on the hood of the Oldsmobile and was going down a page with his thumbnail. "Freight," he said. "Transiting. They're carrying for a party over toward Manoy, and their line takes them across ground that isn't that party's. There's a toll on that. Never money. There's never money. And we do what?" They sat down. I read the transit off. They mark it. You stand there and don't blink and don't take a thing off them. He looked at me over the glasses. "That last one is the one I want you holding on to tonight. They're generous and they're stupid about it." I asked him if they were aliens. I had been sitting on that word for an hour and it came out about as dumb as I expected. "I don't know what that word covers," he said. "They're haulers. If somebody asked you what you were, would you lead with record driver or with Pennsylvanian?" It came in over the far tree line at about the height of a cell tower, and it came in slow. There was no light show. There was a hum, and the hum was a transformer on a pole, that exact note, the one a man stops hearing after a week of living under it. It crossed the treetops without hurrying and settled on the gravel apron where the state used to keep the trash cans, and the gravel did not blow. Not one stone moved. It sat down the way a semi sets down on its airbags, with a long sigh in it, and then it was a thing parked 40 feet away from me. It was about the size of a grain bin lid. The color of a galvanized bucket, nothing anybody would call silver in daylight. Dented on the leading edge, 2 dents, one gone dull and one bright. Along the seam somebody had run a repair that got hot and dripped before it set, and the drip was still on there, hardened, and nobody had ground it flush. On the underside was a long scrape with the metal curled back at the end of it, the scrape a car hauler's ramp gets from being dragged over a curb 400 times because the lot is laid out wrong. That was the first minute of my life where I looked at a thing out of the sky and thought fleet maintenance. 3 of them came out, small, chest high on me at the tallest, Gray the way the underside of a mushroom is gray, and the heads were too big for the necks, and everybody knows that part already, so I will tell the part nobody says. They were tired, not in a poetic way, in the way of guys at the back end of a double, where the shoulders sit forward and the head hangs off plumb, and there is no hurry left in the hands. The first one out put both fists into the small of its back and leaned into them until something let go, then stood with its hands on its hips looking at nothing. And I have watched drivers do that in the lot at the Petro in Frackville 1,000 times. They put a ramp down. It came out of the hull and stuck on the last foot, and one of them hit it with the side of a fist, and it went the rest of the way. The freight came down on a pallet. I am not going to dress it up. A pallet, or their version of one, and on it something under a wrap that had been used before, strapped down with 4 straps that worked exactly the way ratchet straps work, hook and web and a cam handle they leaned on with a foot. The web on the rear left strap was frayed at the edge for about 8 inches and had a burn shine on it where it had run over something sharp. They ran it anyway. That is what I noticed. Not the ship, not the hands, which have too many joints in the fingers, and which I did look at, the strap. Somebody had looked at it at the start of the run and made the call that it would hold one more trip, and I have made that call, and there is a strap on my deck right now. I have made it about. Ordell read the transit off. It took 4 minutes. Whatever was on the pallet, he never named it, and I never asked, and I stood at arm's length and did not blink and let my eyes run. The whole time, all 3 of them kept the ship between themselves and the water. Not once did any of them come around the near side. They worked the far side of the pallet and came down the far side of the ramp. And when the middle one had to cross the open to get to Ordell, it moved at a pace I'd call brisk if I were being kind. Twice, one of them looked out across the reservoir at the Dunlow side, and the second time it did something fast with its hands, a fold and a press, and then it did not look that way again. Across the water the bank was a black shape sitting on a black shape. There had been a west wind all night, hard enough to put a chop on the water, and the smoke went up out of that hill straight as a plumb line, the way it always does. It came to me across the reservoir on that wind, faint, wet pennies, and cold ash. The countersign got made. One of them put a mark on Ordell's page, and it was the only quick thing anybody did out there. Then the small one came over to me. It stopped at about 4 feet, which meant it knew the distance too. Everybody out there knew it, except me. It held out one hand flat, palm up, and there was something sitting on it about the size of a Zippo, dull, with a dark grain in it like slag, and from where I stood I could feel that it was warm. My hand went up. It went up before I had one thought in my head about it. The hand of a man who has been handed 1,000 things over 1,000 fenders, out flat and open the way it has gone out flat and open my whole life. Ordell hit my wrist down, not slapped, hit with the edge of his hand hard enough that I felt it in the 2 fingers that don't work, and then he held my forearm in a grip that a man his size should not have, and he stood there holding it while he said the only thing I have ever heard him say to something that was not a person. "That's not yours to give," he said. The small one folded up. Its shoulders came in and its chin came down, and it put the thing away inside its own hand somehow and backed off 2 steps. And that posture on a 19-year-old kid in a shop lot would have told me exactly what it meant, which was, "I'm sorry, I didn't know. Please don't tell my boss." It went up the ramp. The ramp stuck again. Nobody hit it that time. In the car, Ordell had both hands on the wheel and did not start it. "You take a thing off freight," he said. "You have entered terms. Not with the freight. They don't own anything and they can't strike anything. They're a truck with a driver in it. You'd have entered with whoever that pallet belongs to, 2 counties over, sight unseen, no clause in it, because nobody read you one. You'd have gone the rest of your life owned by something you never saw the name of, and thought you got a souvenir. It was being nice. It was," he said. "That's how it works. Nobody in this line has ever been ruined by an enemy. Not once in 31 years. My hand was still open on my knee. "That's it," I said. "That's the whole thing. There's men who've given their whole lives to this. My brother-in-law's got a shelf of it." "He does," Ordell said. "They come out at night and get an old pallet across the county line. Every night. somewhere, same as anybody. He got the glasses off his nose and started in on them with the tail of his tie, which is what he does instead of laughing. You know what the black have been doing for 60 years? That, right there. Knocking on farmhouse doors 12 hours after somebody's aunt sees a light. Standing around a burnt ring and a soybean field with a clipboard. Doing the voice. 60 years. And they have it in their heads they're guarding the secret of the century. And they're not. They're staking out the loading dock behind a hospital, he said, and calling it medicine. That was the funniest thing he ever said to me. I laughed, and then I quit, because his face had not moved. Why, I said, if they're what you say they were, if they used to be us, why would a man who knew better spend his life on a delivery? Ordell put the glasses back on. Because it's what he's got left to see, he said. When your name comes out of the book, your eyes come down with it, all the way to the bottom rung, and the bottom rung is freight. He can see a saucer, he can see a little gray fellow with a bad back, he cannot see a party, and he cannot see terms struck 6 feet in front of him with his sunglasses on. So he chases the only thing that still shows up on his film, and he gets serious about it, and he does the voice. The hum came up. It went out over the water at the same speed it came in, and I stood on the gravel and watched it cross that chop. And here is the thing. That reservoir had whitecaps on it all night. The craft passed low enough that I could have put a wrench on it, and the water underneath did not do one thing, not a dish in it. The cattails on the point kept moving with the wind, and did not move with anything else. Then it was past the tree line, and then the hum thinned out, and then it was not there. Ordell started the car. I had spent 3 weeks feeling like a man who'd been let in on something. Standing on that gravel, I got it straight. I was not in the room. I was not in the building. I was in the lot at 1 in the morning, and the ones I had just watched pull out were the ones who bring the mail to the door, and they would not cross a mile of water, because of a hill I buy my gas at the bottom of. The strap is what I kept coming back to on the ride home. Frayed 8 inches, shined up where it had run over something. They knew. They ran it anyway, because the load had to move tonight, and that is what anybody does when the load has to move. There is only one way I know to say the next part. The porch light was on at the Bednar place, and it was full daylight. That was the first thing, coming down Quarry Street at 6:15 with the sun already up over the roofline and the school bus 2 streets away making its stops. A yellow bug light burning over a front door at 6 in the morning. My mother used to say a light left on meant somebody was still out. It never meant anything at all except that a person forgot. The second thing was Ordell's Oldsmobile, parked crooked with the driver's door hanging open and the bell going ding 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 into the street. In a month I had never seen that man park anything crooked. He backed into every space he ever used. He shut doors like he was afraid of waking somebody. He was standing in the road, about level with the mailbox. Not on the walk, not in the yard, in the road, in the wheel track, with his hands down at his sides. I put the wrecker on the hill and left it running and got out. Quarry Street is 9 houses on the uphill side and 6 on the down, all of them half doubles put up by the company in the 20s for men who worked the Kessler slope. Aluminum siding over the original clapboard on most of them. Little concrete stoops. That morning there was frost on every lawn on the street, that thin scald of frost that comes in late October when it goes down to 29 overnight and comes back up by 9. Every lawn but the Bednars. Their grass was wet and green and steaming a little in the cold, and the frost came up to the property line and stopped. Not a rough line either, a curve. It went around their yard the way water goes around a stone. I walked up the sidewalk, and my boot soles got warm. Ordell, he did not turn around. He was looking at the front window, the picture window, where the curtain was pushed back and hooked on the little brass hook that comes with them. There was a girl, he said, down at the corner, Wenzel. She had a swim meet, so she was out on her porch at 1:30 waiting on a ride, and they parked at the corner and they got out and they did the routine at the Kovac house. Wrong house, 2 doors off. They stood under the Kovac porch light in their sunglasses at 1:30 in the morning, and they asked Ed Kovac if he had been feeling safe lately, and Ed Kovac shut the door on them, and that girl filmed the whole thing on her phone because they looked like something off a show. Okay, I said. The Kovac house is across from this one. He lifted his chin at the picture window. She had the phone up. She was getting them, and this window is behind them, and Angela Bednar was standing right there at that glass with a pen in her hand. I did not understand yet. I stood on a warm sidewalk in October and thought about a teenage girl in a swim parka with a phone up, and I did not get there. One frame. Ordell said. Both of them in it. Her and the paper. So they saw it happen. No. The picture saw it happen. He turned around then. His face was the same face. That was the part I could not get past for a long time afterward. The face was exactly the face he wore at the diner. A witnessing takes one body, standing at arm's length, that can be spent for what it saw. That's the whole of it. That's why I have to be there and why I can't sit down and why I can't take a cup of coffee off a waitress. Because I have to be able to pay for it. A picture can't be spent. A picture is a mouth with nothing behind it, and it testifies anyway, and when two things testify and only one of them can be held to it, neither one binds. Which means what? Which means nobody stood here, he said. Which means there was no limit on it. He walked up the concrete stoop, and he did not touch the front door. He went around the side of the house instead, through the strip of dirt between the Bednars and the neighbors, and I went after him. The back door was standing open, wide open, flat against the siding, and Ordell stepped around the swing of it and did not go through it, and I remembered him telling me in the first week not to close a door I did not open. The smell came out at me on the back step. Wet pennies and cold ash. That smell got into the roof of my mouth and stayed there for 2 days. He let me get as far as the mat. There were 4 of them in the kitchen. Angela Bednar and her husband, whose name was Mick, and who I had pulled out of a ditch on Route 924 one time in 2019, and the boy, who was maybe 14, and the little girl. I am not going to say what the room looked like. I have hauled cars with people still in them. I have carried a bag of a man off Blackwater Hollow Road in a hard rain. That is not the same as this, and I do not have anything to compare it to, so I will give the one thing my eye kept and would not put down. All 4 of them were looking at the same spot on the ceiling, not up, at. 4 faces, 4 different heights, 4 different angles, all of them lined on one point in the plaster over the table, the way a family looks at a television. I put the back of my hand against the doorframe because my legs had gone bad on me and I needed the frame, and the frame was warm too. Ordell had his book out. He had it open on his forearm with the pen in his hand, and he stood there in that doorway for what had to be a minute and a half, and he did not write anything. There's nothing to enter, he said. Write what happened. That's not what it's for. He looked at the page. It's not a diary. It records terms. There weren't any terms. There was an offer and a want, and no limit on either one. And a thing that has been owed since before this street had a name came up under a kitchen and took the whole household, because nobody was standing there to say what it was owed. What was it owed? A car, Ordell said. I looked at him. She was going to sign over a 1992 Corsica that her mother left her because the boy has a kidney thing and there's a treatment in Danville and the insurance quit in August. He shut the book. That's what the paper said. That's all it was going to cost her. A car and a lien on the daughter's marriage if she ever made one. They were not sloppy, he said. That is what I want on the record between you and me. Everybody who ever sees them thinks sloppy. Sloppy would be an accident. Sloppy would be a man in a bad suit knocking on the wrong door at 1:30 in the morning. They knocked on the wrong door at 1:30 in the morning under a light at the top of a street with an east-facing porch on it on a morning when a girl with a phone had a bus to catch at 2. Down at the bottom of Quarry Street, at the stop sign, a black sedan pulled up and sat there with its brake lights on. I have thought about this next part more than anything else that happened that fall. Ordell went down the middle of the road. He did not run. He walked, fast, the way a man walks at a dog that has gotten into something, and about halfway there he started hollering, and his voice came apart in the middle of it. It went up into a register that did not have anything left in it of the dry little man who would not sit in a booth I pulled a chair out of. You stood where I'm standing, he said. You stood there. You had the book in your hands, and you know what it costs, and you went and got yourself photographed on purpose. 4. There's 4 in that kitchen. 4. The sedan sat. You were men, he said. You were men who could do this. He got to it. He hit the trunk lid with the flat of his hand once, hard enough that it boomed like a barrel, and the car pulled away from the stop sign at about 15 miles an hour, not hurrying, and the one in the back turned around and looked at him through the glass. I could see the sunglasses from where I was, up by the mailbox. I could see the smile. It came on the way theirs always did, both corners going at once and the lips staying shut, and it stayed on the whole way down the block until the car turned onto Second and was gone. Ordell stood in the intersection for a while. When he came back up the hill, he had his glasses off and he was wiping them on the end of his tie over and over in little circles, and I watched him try to get the cord back over his head 3 separate times. His hands would not do it. He would get the loop up as far as his ear and it would slip. He is a man who reads mind seals for a living, and his hands would not put a piece of elastic string over his own head. I did not offer to help. Not because of any rule. I just could not make myself. Ordell, it used to be, he said, that you had to be able to do this work to be allowed to do that one. He got the cord on. He looked back down the empty street. That's not us, he said, but it was. The sun came up over the Kovac roof while we stood there, and the frost started going off the other lawns, and by the time I got back in the truck, the line around the Bednar yard was closing in from the edges, the wet green shrinking toward the house, the frost taking back its circle a foot at a time like something being let go of. There were other books. I found that out on a Thursday, at a nothing job out on Ridge Road, a transfer between 2 brothers who had inherited terms along with a hayfield and could not stand each other. Ordell had the trunk of the Oldsmobile open to get his coat, and set down in the well next to the spare was a plastic milk crate, the yellow kind you steal from behind a turkey hill, and in it were books, gray cloth, soft at the corners, same as the one he carried. 11 of them, standing up on their spines the way records stand in a box, and each spine had a little paper label glued on, and each label had a number written on it in that ink that does not shine. The one nearest the back of the car said 416, the next one over said 417. He shut the trunk before I got a good look at the rest. Those all yours? I said. They're the counties. Which county? This one, he said, and he put his coat on. 2 nights later, we were at the anthracite at 10 after 3 in the morning, and Nadine had my cup filled and had learned by then not to reach for the empty place across from me, and I asked him, who was standing in this county in 1998? He did not say anything. He had his hands on the table. He put one of them flat over the top of the mug that was not his and had never been his, which was a thing he did when he wanted a hand to be doing something, and I sat there and watched him not answer for long enough that the fryer kicked on twice. I was in Schuylkill until 2001, he said. That's not what I asked. I know what you asked. He took his glasses off. He did not wipe them. He held them. Do you want to tell me why you're asking? And here's the thing. That man had asked me why about everything. He asked me why I bought the coffee if I was not going to drink it hot. He asked me why my daughter collects those little packets out of shoe boxes, and he listened to the whole answer. He asked me if I wanted to tell him. He did not ask me why. No, I said. All right, he said, and put the glasses back on. And after a minute he started talking about a mine fire in Carbon County in 1987, and I let him. I went out to Cadger's Bog on the Tuesday, in the daylight, which I had not done in 20 years. Nights, sure. There is no way to run a wrecker in Dunlow and not go up Old Furnace Road, and I have hooked cars out of the weeds a quarter-mile north of that pull-off and gone back by it at 4 in the morning with a Cavalier on the deck and never once turned my head. What I had not done since I was a kid was stop there with the sun up and get out. It was one of those November days that is bright and has nothing in it. The hemlocks were black the way they always are. The water was black. Cadger's is not a pond. It is about 11 acres of black water with cattail out to 20 feet and then nothing. And the bottom of it is silt over old mine water, and there is no bottom in the sense that a person means bottom. Divers came in 1998 and quit after a day and a half. They found the car by dragging. The pull-off is on the west side. 40 feet of gravel between the road and the drop, and there is guardrail along the whole run of it, which there was in 98 too, because that rail went in the year my father graduated. It is W-beam on wood posts, the old galvanized that has gone the color of a nickel. 30-odd years of plow trucks and salt and boys backing into it. If a person walks that rail, the beam bellies in and out along its length, in at the posts, out between them, and every fourth or fifth post leans a little downhill, and there is orange coming through the galvanizing at every bolt. I walked it because that is what I do. I have been reading roadside furniture since I was 22 years old. Gary Vetter reads tire marks. I read rail. A rail remembers. Paint transfer sits in the beam for years. A hit that puts a car through will lay a post over and rip the bolt through the beam like a can opener, and the scar stays in the dirt behind it for a decade after. Because the ground behind a hit rail gets plowed up by the post going over, and it never grows back the same. About 60 feet in from the north end, there was a splice. One section of beam, 12.5 foot, and it was newer than everything on either side of it, straighter. The galvanizing on it was still gray and not gone to that nickel color. It had been in the ground a long time, 25 years, 30, but it had been in the ground less than the rest. That was where the Nova went in. I knew that without checking, there is a stone at that spot that people use to leave things on. I want to tell about my brother for a minute. Petey was 8 years older than me, which is the exact wrong gap. He was not a second father, and he was not a kid I could follow around. He was a whole other person who lived in my house and had his own weather. In 1998, he was 19, and he had a job at Federolf's Sunoco in Bly, pumping gas and doing state inspections he was not licensed to do. And he had a 1972 Nova with a 350 in it that he bought off a man in Shepton for $600. It was green. Sort of green. The passenger side quarter panel had a patch of gray primer on it about the size of a serving platter where he had cut out the rust and welded in metal off a different car, and he never painted it because he was going to do the whole car at once, the way a man does at 19 when time is a thing there is going to be more of ice. He ate the ice out of his drink, always, all of it, and it drove our mother up the wall. He called me Rooster, because when I was little I had a cowlick that would not lay down. The summer of 98 he taught me to drive on the Culm Bank Access Road, which is 1.25 miles of switchback grade cut for haul trucks in the 50s, and which nobody used anymore except kids. I was 11. He put the Bly phone book and the Hazelton phone book on the seat, and he sat in the passenger side with his knees up on the dash, and he did not yell at me one time. Not even when I stalled it, going up the first pitch, and rolled backward far enough that the rear tire dropped off the edge of the cut, and he had to walk down to Furco's and borrow a jack. He said, "Keep your eyes where you want the car to be, not where it is." That was in July, I think. It might have been June. August is a hole. I had a fever. I know that the way I know my social security number, which is to say somebody told it to me so many times that it turned into a fact about me. 104. It went into my blood, is how our mother always put it. And there was a doctor at the hospital in Bly named Seraph who told her a thing in the hallway that she never repeated in front of me until she was 70 years old and could not stop repeating things. What I have from that August is 4 or 5 pieces, and none of them are in order. The ceiling of my room, which had a water stain over the closet in the shape of a boot, ice in a washcloth, my mother wringing it out into a Cool Whip container, the sound of the box fan in the hall, and her shoes. She had a pair of white canvas sneakers, the cheap ones, and she wore them everywhere that summer, and there were mornings that August when they were sitting on the floor register in the dining room drying out. Black mud dried in the tread. Not garden dirt, Our garden was clay, and it dries the color of a flower pot. This was black, and it came out of the tread in little rolls when it dried, and there was a smell that went with it that I did not have a name for when I was 11, and that I have had a name for since the first night on Old Furnace Road, when Ordell Mace told me to stand right there and not say my own name out loud. It was not one morning. It was more than one. She went out at night in August, and my father had been gone since '94, and Petey worked till 9 and slept, and I was in a bed with a fever of 104, and a woman who had 2 boys and no car of her own went out somewhere at night and came back with the bog on her shoes and put them on the register so they would be dry by morning, and nobody ever said one word about it. Not that year, and not in the 28 years after it. Of the night my brother died, I have nothing at all. Not a phone ringing. Not a knock. I woke up, and it was light out, and the house was full of people, and my mother was at the sink in the kitchen with her hair done, and my Aunt Dolly was there, and somebody had brought a ham, and I asked where Petey was, and my mother said he had a wreck out on the Furnace Road, and she said it in the voice she used for telling me the water was going to be shut off for a few hours. I stood at that guardrail in November with the sun going down behind the hemlocks, and I ran my hand along that splice section. Straight. Not a belly in it anywhere. The face of that beam was as flat as the day it came off the roll, and there was no paint on it, no transfer, no gouge, no place where anything had ever bit into the galvanizing. I got down on my knees in the gravel and looked at the posts on both ends of the splice. They were original, both of them. Same weathered oak as every other post on that run, same rust bleed at the bolt, same 40-degree lean downhill from 30 years of plow spray. The holes in them were the original holes. There was no second set of holes drilled where a new post would have gone, because there was no new post. Somebody had unbolted 12.5 feet of beam off 2 posts that had been standing there since before I was born, and had bolted a new piece of beam onto them. And behind the rail, on the drop side, the ground had a hemlock growing out of it, about as thick as my wrist. And a hemlock that thick in that soil is 30 years of growing. And the duff around it had never been turned over. Nothing hit that rail. There's no way off that pull-off and into that water except over that rail or through it, and nothing had gone through it, and I stayed on my knees in the gravel for a while with my hand on a post that had never been knocked out of the ground. I drove up to Bly from the bog with my knees still wet. The keypad on the second floor at Bly Manor carries 1145, and it has been 1145 since they put the ward in, and they tell the families to keep it to themselves like it is a bank. The sign in clipboard hangs on a nail next to the door. I stood there with the pen and went up the sheet looking for the last time I was on it, and found it on the 4th page back, October 14th. My own printing, 6 weeks and a day. It smells like green beans and bleach up there. Not one and then the other. Both at once, all the time, from a kitchen nobody ever sees, and a cart somebody is always pushing. Dee Coslow was at the desk. She has been on that floor 11 years, and she has one of those faces that is doing a kindness to somebody even when she is looking at a computer. There he is, she said. Han, she's good today. She's been up since 5. That good or bad. With her, it's just up. She came around the desk and walked me down. The shoes are still a fight, I'll tell you that. She won't have them off. I got her down to letting me get them off at bath, and that's it. She sleeps in them, ties them herself, and they're wrong, and she gets combative if you go near the laces. Since when? Since I've had her, Dee said. 2.5 years. She stopped outside 217. Her drawings, Dee said. Did you ever ask her about that? Because I asked her once, and she looked at me like I asked her what the microwave was for. My mother's room is on the southeast corner, and she has the window side. She was in the chair by it with a paper placemat on her knees, the kind that comes on the lunch tray with the days of the week printed around the border. And she had it turned over, and she was working on the back of it with a golf pencil. 71 years old. She looks 85. She was a big woman my whole childhood, and now the sweater goes around her twice. Hey, Ma, She looked up and her whole face came on. "Petey," she said. "Oh, honey." I sat down on the end of the bed, which is where I sit, because if I take the other chair, she can only see me by turning her head, and it makes her anxious. "It's Russ, Ma." She smiled at me and reached over and patted my knee twice, the way she has since I was a boy, 2 pats, and she said, "I know who you are." She said it the way she used to correct me on where I put the milk. Patient. A little tired of it. Not one thing in her face was confused. There is a version of this that is nothing. Old woman, wrong name. Her son sitting there being sensitive about it. The staff has a word for it, and the word is confusion, and they use it gently, and they use it about everybody up there. Mrs. Yatsko down the hall calls every aide Bernice. That is confusion. Confusion is a wrong thing, arriving in place of a right thing. My mother has called me Petey for 3 years, and she has never once called me Russell, and she has said Russell in front of me maybe 20 times. And every single one of those times she was talking about somebody who was not in the room. "You get your shoes dry?" she said. "What's that?" "Your shoes." She was back at the placemat. "You had them on the register. They are dry." "Well, that's good," she said. "That's good. That's a good thing." We talked about nothing for a while. She wanted to know if the Sunoco was still going, which it is not. It is a vape shop now, but I said it was. She wanted to know if I was still driving that car with the spot on it, and she laughed about the spot, and she said, "You were going to paint it," and I said I was. I was going to do the whole thing at once. Then she said, "Have you been out to see your brother?" The radiator was ticking under the window. There is a nurse call chime up there that goes off about every 4 minutes, and it went off then. "Which brother, Ma?" "The one out on the furnace road," she said, and she licked the pencil and went back to her drawing. Dee came in around then with the little cup of pills and a Dixie cup of water, and while my mother was taking them, Dee said to me, over her head, in that voice they use for talking about somebody in front of them, "She's been off since yesterday afternoon. It's the wind, I swear to God. Any time it comes around out of that corner, she won't settle. We've got 3 of them on this end that do it, but she's the worst. Yesterday she was up and down the hall from 3 to 6. Out of what corner?" Dee pointed with the empty pill cup out the window, over the parking lot and the retention pond and the trees, down the long grade toward the notch in the ridge where Route 924 goes southeast. 20 minutes that way is Dunlow, and a little past Dunlow, on the flat where the breaker used to stand, is 140 feet of burning calm that has been going since 1962. When Dee left, I picked up the placemat that was on the nightstand, the one she had finished before I got there. It was a long, low hump, drawn heavy, gone over so many times that the pencil had cut the paper in places, flat on the left shoulder where the conveyor came down and dumped for 40 years. A little step at the right end, and out of the top of it, one line straight up and past the top of the paper. "That's a good one," I said. "What is it?" "That's the whale," she said. I opened the nightstand drawer to put it away. The drawer was full of them, not a few. Full, packed down, the way a drawer gets when somebody has been putting one thing in it every day for a long time, and Dee told me later that they empty it every couple of months. I went through some of the ones on top, all the same shape, all the same line going up out of it. On a few of the older ones, the paper had been gone over so hard in that one spot that the line had cut all the way through. And when I held one of those up to the window, there was a slit in it about 1.5 inches long, right through the middle of the smoke, with light coming through. Behind me, she started up. It was not a noise exactly. She got restless in the chair, both hands going on the arms of it, and she started saying, "All right, all right, all right, all right," at about the speed a person taps a foot, and her feet were going on the floor, both of them, in those shoes with the laces tied wrong. I got over there and crouched down and put my hand on her arm. Out the window, the flag on the pole by the entrance had come around and was standing straight out toward the building. "Ma." "Hey." "It's all right." And she took hold of my wrist. 71 years old, 90-some pounds, a woman who cannot open a cup of applesauce. She got my right wrist in her left hand, and she got her thumb up into the underside of it between the two bones, and it hurt. I want to be clear. It hurt, and I could not have gotten loose of it without standing up and using my weight, and I sat there in a crouch by a chair in a dementia ward with my hand going cold and did not pull. She pulled me in until her face was about a foot off mine, and her eyes were as clear as the day she taught me to drive her Escort in the church lot. I only signed the one, she said. The book came to me on a Thursday, in Bly, in the front seat of his car, while an old man on 6th Street was busy dying. I had it open on my knee for a good minute before I let myself admit I was going to read it. Ordell drove a brown Oldsmobile with a vinyl roof gone chalky at the seams, and a heater that only worked on high. We were parked at the curb on 6th Street in Bly, in front of a house with a hospice van in the driveway and a wheelchair ramp that had been built out of deck lumber and never painted. An old man named Aldo Petrunik was inside dying, and his people were inside yelling about a boiler in a right-of-way and about which of them had driven up from Baltimore and which of them had not. Ordell had gone up the ramp to see whether they were done. Terms do not get struck in a room where people are shouting. He told me that on the way over, the same way he'd tell me the exhaust was blowing. He left his hat on the seat. He left the book under it. He had never done that. 4 months I had been riding with him, and the book lived in the inside left pocket of that gray coat. And the second day he told me flat that I was not to touch it, and it was not a warning. It was a fact about the world, like which shoulder on old furnace will hold a wrecker and which one is filled that goes soft in a thaw. He left it. I moved the hat. It was smaller than I remembered, about the size of a paperback western off the rack at the Turkey Hill, cloth bound in gray that had gone the color of a coat sleeve, and the corners were soft, not bent, soft, worn round like the corner of a bar of soap. On the spine there was a paper label with a number on it, 114. The number was written in the stuff the pen writes in, which is not ink. Ink lies on top of paper. This sat down into it, the way water sits down into a shop rag. My hands are not good hands anymore. 2 fingers on the left are fused stiff at the middle knuckle from a cable that came apart on me in 2009, and they don't open a book. I got a thumb in it and let it fall. Hands I didn't know went past in a blur, dozens of them. Some of it was the old, long, slanted writing that people don't teach anymore. Some of it was block print. Some of it was a fist so bad I couldn't have read it for money. Dates in the margins going back further than the town has been the size it is. Entry after entry after entry, all of them short. That's the part that got me first. There is not one long entry in that book. A whole family goes by in 6 lines. I went looking for August of 1998. I didn't find it. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I never found it. I put my thumb in to take another handful of pages, and the handful was already gone, and the book was lying open flat on my knee at the page in an Oldsmobile with the windows up, and my hand had not done that. The date was in the left margin, 11th of August, 1998. Under it, the time, 4:50 in the morning, party and interest, and then the entry did not say kettle. Kettle is what men call it. What was written there was the seam under Dunlow. Signatory, Dorothy Ann Chambliss. Terms, 1 son kept, 1 son rendered. And then 2 columns, and my mother's whole life sitting in them. Under kept, somebody had written Peter Allen Chambliss, and then somebody had drawn a line through it. Under rendered, somebody had written Russell Wayne Chambliss, and then somebody had drawn a line through that too. The lines were straight. That's what I noticed. That's what my head reached for, while the rest of me was somewhere behind. Whoever crossed out my brother and whoever crossed out me had laid a straight edge along the page to do it, because a man in that job does not want any question later about what he meant. Both names were still clean under the strikes. Nothing was blotted, nothing was hidden. It was the neatest piece of paperwork I have ever seen in my life, and I have watched insurance men work a total loss. Above the strikes, and a second hand, smaller. The names had been put back the other way around. Peter Allen Chambliss in the rendered column, Russell Wayne Chambliss in the kept. I sat there and did the only thing I know how to do, which is read a scene. That's the job. A man gets to a wreck and he doesn't ask anybody anything. He looks at where the glass went and how the mud is thrown and which way the grass is laid over, and the scene tells him what happened, whether the driver wants it to or not. So I read it. The original entry was made at 4:50 in the morning on the 11th of August, 1998. In the original entry, the son who was kept was Petey, and the son who was rendered was me. I was 11 years old. I had a fever of 104, and it had gone into the blood, and I was in the back bedroom on Mill Street with a fan pointed at me and a wet washcloth going warm on my forehead, and my mother was not in the house. Petey was 19. Petey was fine. Petey had a 72 Nova with a primer spot on the right quarter panel, and he was fine. He was asleep on the couch with his boots on. He had work in the morning. 6 days later, Petey put the Nova into Cadger's Bog off Old Furnace Road, and my fever broke on the 14th, and I got up and ate a bowl of cereal. The correction was dated, same page, right margin, in the second hand, 17th of August, 1998. Under the columns, there was a line for the witness. On it, in the first hand, W. Prosser. I didn't know it. I have lived in that county my entire life, and I have towed for half of it, and there is no Prosser in Dunlow or Bly or anywhere down the valley, and I know the names on the mailboxes better than I know my own phone number. Under that line there was a second line, and it was for the correction, and there was a signature on it. O. Mace. I want to say the car got cold. It didn't. It went the other way. Heat came up through the floor pan of that Oldsmobile like I had the exhaust rotted out under my heels, and the pan was cold to the back of my hand when I put it down there to check, and the heat kept coming anyway. Then the smell, wet pennies and cold ash, in a closed car, on a November afternoon, on a street in Bly 20 minutes from Dunlow, with a hospice van in the driveway, and a woman on the porch smoking and looking at nothing. The page went warm under my thumb. I said my own name out loud. That was the stupidest thing I have ever done, and I did it the way a man reads a part number off a box to make sure he's got the right one. 2 words. Quiet. In an empty car. Russell Chambliss. Somewhere under the street, a long way under it, a very large door was closed. Not slammed. Closed the way a man closes a door in a house where somebody is sleeping, with his hand still on it at the end so the latch doesn't bark. Then Ordell was at the glass. He didn't yank the door. He stood there in that gray suit that was wrong in the shoulders, the way they always are, with his reading glasses hanging on the cord and the wind moving what was left of his hair, and he looked in at the book on my knee. And I watched a thing happen to his face that I had not seen on it once, not at the Beck House, not on Quarry Street, not when he stood in the road screaming at a sedan. He looked the way men look at a hospital when they come out into the lot. He opened the passenger door and put his hand out, and I gave him the book. He closed it without looking at the page. He put it in the inside left pocket. He got into the driver's seat and shut the door and sat with both hands on the wheel and didn't start the car. "That's your signature," I said. "Yes," Ordell said. "On the correction." "Yes." "You moved my brother's name into the hole where my name was." "No," Ordell said. "I stood there while it was moved. That's not the same job, and it's the only job I've got." The woman on the porch put her cigarette out on the rail and went inside, and the storm door banged, and nobody yelled anymore in that house. The transfer was ready. Aldo Petrunik was in there waiting to hand a set of terms to a nephew who had driven up from Baltimore, and there was work to do, and neither one of us moved. "You knew," I said, "the first night, on Old Furnace. You knew whose kid I was." Ordell took the glasses off the cord and cleaned them on his tie, which is what he does instead of anything else. "You read your own entry," he said. "That's not an answer. It's the only thing that matters in this car right now, so shut up and hear it." He put the glasses back on. He still hadn't looked at me. "A witness reads the book. A party is read out of it. Those are 2 different sides of a page, and a man is one or the other, and he does not get to be both." You just read your own name in the rendered column and you said it out loud in a place where it could be heard. So what? So an hour ago you were furniture, Ordell said. You were a body standing at arm's length, that nothing was owed and nothing owed to. That is the whole protection. That is all Gray is. He started the car then. The heater came on high because it didn't come on any other way. Now you're a party, he said. And a party can be collected. 2 nights later he took me up the bank. We went up the access road at 10 at night in my wrecker, because the Oldsmobile would not have made the grade. That road is 2 ruts and a crown of red dog, the burnt shale they used to spread instead of gravel, and it goes up the west side of the Dunlow Culm Bank in 3 long switchbacks that were cut for coal trucks in 1950-something, and have not been maintained since. Petey taught me to drive on it. Second switchback, summer of '97, the Nova, him in the passenger seat with his arm out the window, telling me to quit riding the clutch. I did not bring that up. Ordell rode with his hands in his lap. He did not hold the grab handle even when the back end walked. He had not said 40 words since 6th Street. The bank is 140 feet of refuse, slate, bone, coal, whatever, came out of Kessler and got thrown over the side for 80 years. It caught fire in 1962, and it has been burning ever since, down inside itself. And there is nothing anybody can do about it. And every 10 years, a man from Harrisburg comes and takes a temperature and goes home. A man knows he's on the dead ground before the headlights tell him. The ground stops making noise. Up on the county side, the road is frozen mud, and the tires talk about it. Then there's a line, and past the line the ruts are dry and soft, and the truck goes quiet, and there's no ice in the low spots, and there's nothing growing. Not dead grass. Nothing. A quarter mile in every direction of the bank there is bare-made ground with a crust on it, and the crust is warm. I parked below the cap and left the truck running, and then thought about it and shut it off. There had been snow Tuesday, 4 inches, and the whole valley still had it. The bank had none. Not melted off, not patchy. The snow line came up the slope in a curve and stopped, and past it the ground was black and dry, and along that line there was frost, and the frost went around the hill in a circle like somebody had drawn it with a compass. The smoke came up out of the top of the pile straight as a chimney. The wind that night was out of the southeast, hard enough to take my hat if I'd had one on. The smoke did not lean. Don't stand in it, Ordell said. The wind's carrying carbon monoxide off the west face. It doesn't smell like anything. Men have sat down on this hill to rest. That was the whole warning, and it was about gas, and it was the most normal thing anybody had said to me in a month. Kessler number 3 is 100 yards along the bench, cut into the high wall where the rock face comes out of the pile. They sealed it in 1971. What that means is a slab of concrete about 10 feet across poured into the portal with a steel door set into it, and the door is what they put in so the state could get in to read instruments, and the state stopped reading instruments a long time ago. It is painted the green that everything on state property gets painted. There's a hasp with no lock in it. Somebody spray painted a name on the concrete once, and the paint has come off in sheets and left the name in a lighter green than the rest. I put my hand flat on the door from 6 inches away and took it back. Yeah, Ordell said. It was not warm like a stove, it was warm like a person. It was the temperature of a hand under a blanket, and the steel had a give to the air around it, and I had to stand there and make myself understand that I was feeling a door. Wet pennies, cold ash. It came out around the frame in a slow way, in and out, and I got about halfway to a thought about what that pattern is called, and then I stopped having that thought on purpose. Ordell walked past me and put his back against the concrete and looked out at the valley, at the sodium lights of Dunlow down there and the one string of them going north to Bly. My father was 31 years underground at Kessler and number 2, he said. He came out on his own feet, which was not common. First thing he taught me was not a knot, and it wasn't a lamp. Look up. I looked up, over the door, in the rock face. About 12 feet off the bench, there was a stump. Not a stump. It looked like a stump. It was a circle of black rock about 2 feet across, set in the sandstone above the portal like a plug, and it had rings in it. Growth rings. It had bark, or it had the memory of bark, a rough sleeve around the outside of it, and the whole of it sat proud of the face by an inch. "That's a kettle bottom," Ordell said. "Fossil tree. It grew in a swamp about 300 million years ago. It fell over, it filled with sand, and the seam laid down around it. When they drove the heading through, that came into the roof. See how it's round? See how the sides are slick? It's in the rock. It's in the roof," he said. "In there, it's in the roof. 100 yards in from where you're standing, there's a heading with a dozen of them, and they've been up there since the last man walked out. They don't crack. That's what a man doesn't understand until it happens near him. Rock talks, rock ticks, and it works, and it drops crumbs on your hat and gives you about 4 seconds. A kettle bottom doesn't do any of that. It's slick all around, and it's not attached to anything. It sits up there in the roof looking exactly like the roof, and one day the sandstone around it lets go of it, and it comes down." "How big?" "That one's small," Ordell said. "That one weighs about what your truck's front axle weighs. They found a man under one at number 2 in 1954, and they got him out in 3 hours, and there was not a mark on his hands. He never put 'em up." I stood there and looked at it. The wind came across the bench and took the smoke straight up. "So the rule is, don't stand under it," I said. "That's half. What's the other half?" "Don't look up at it twice," Ordell said. I waited for him to make a joke out of it. Ordell will make a joke out of most things. Dry, half a beat late, and he did not make one. "The first look is you doing your job," he said. "You're checking the roof. Every man checks the roof. That's what you're paid for. The second look isn't checking. The second look is you asking it something." He took his glasses off and put them on again. "My father said it like a superstition because that's the only way anybody would carry it. It's not a superstition. Anything you ask gets answered, and you don't get to pick who answers." We stood there another minute. Then he pushed off the concrete and started back along the bench toward the truck, and I went after him. 20 feet along, I looked up at it again. I want to be honest about why. It was not brave, and it was not a test. I looked up because a man told me not to. That's all that was. That's the same reason I climbed the tipple at number 2 when I was 13, and the same reason I put my hand on a hot manifold once to see. The kettle bottom was where it had been. Black circle, rings, slick sleeve of bark, 12 feet up in the face, over a green steel door. Nothing happened. I want that plain, because it is the part I have gone over the most. Nothing happened. No sound. The smoke went up. The frost stayed in its circle. Ordell was 15 feet ahead of me, with his hands in his coat pockets, and he did not turn around, and he did not know, because there was nothing to know. No wind change. No heat. My hands were fine. My hands were the steadiest they had been in a week. I got in the truck and turned the key, and the diesel caught, and the glow plug light went out, and I sat there with my foot on the brake for no reason. "Well," Ordell said. "Well," I said. We came down the switchbacks in low. At the bottom, where the ruts go back to frozen mud and the tires start talking again, I crossed the line and the noise came up under us, and I let my breath out and did not know until then that I had been holding any. Back at Vedder's, I shut it down in the gravel, and Ordell got in his Oldsmobile and left, and I sat in the cab with the engine off. The heater ticked while it cooled. Out past the fence, the sign with the cartoon tow hook was swinging on its chain in the southeast wind. Nothing had happened. That's what I kept getting. I sat there with cold coffee in the cup holder from the afternoon, and I ran it again from the top, the drive, the door, the smell going in and out around the frame, the rings in the rock. And every time I got to the second look, there was nothing at the end of it, and every time I got there, I started it over. It kept on not happening the whole way through the night. I got to the anthracite at 3, and Deb brought me coffee without asking, because at 3 in the morning there is nobody in there to ask. Ordell came in 10 minutes later. Same booth, back corner, facing the door and the parking lot both, which I understood by then was not caution. It was habit from 31 years of standing where he could see everybody in a room at once. He sat down and put his hands on the table. Deb came over with the pot, and Ordell put his hand flat over the cup, palm down, and left it there until she went away. She's been doing that dance with him for years. She thinks he's got a stomach. I had a tow ticket out of my shirt pocket, one of the yellow carbons. and I had written 4 things on the back of it in the truck with the dome light on. I put it on the table and turned it around so he could read it, and then I took my hand off it. He read it. He read it twice. He didn't touch it. Ask them out loud, Ordell said. Not off of paper. If it matters enough to write down, it matters enough to say. Can terms be moved? They can be transferred. That's the word. Use the word. He leaned back. Anybody who holds terms can hand them to anybody who will take them. Old man on 6th Street handed his to a nephew from Baltimore last week, and you sat in the car for it. That's not rare. That's half the work. Family farms, wells, mines when there were mines. A set of terms outlives the man who struck it by 100 years, and it gets passed down a line like a barn. How? The same way it got struck the first time, Ordell said. That's the whole of it, and don't make it complicated. It happens in front of a witness. In front of, not near, not in the same room, not out in the yard. Arm's length, eyes open, entered in the book while it's happening, and not after. He tapped the formica once with a knuckle. No witness, no transfer. 2 people saying words at each other in a kitchen. Nothing moves. Nothing binds. Say it plain. Terms can be handed off, he said. Only in front of a witness. That's plain enough for a 9-year-old, and it's the truest thing in the trade. Deb went past with a rag and wiped the counter that was already clean. The fryer clicked over in the back. Second one, I said. Can a man take somebody else's place? Ordell looked at me for a while. He had known that was on the paper since he read it. He had been deciding. A party can substitute himself for another party, he said. Put himself where the other one was standing. It's done. It's not common, and it's not free. And I've witnessed it twice. How does it work? It works if the party in interest comes out even, Ordell said. Same weight. That's the only condition, and it's the whole condition. If what goes in weighs the same as what comes out, it's a substitution and it holds. If it weighs less, it's not a substitution, it's a gift. And nothing at that level takes gifts. It'll take the gift, and it'll take the original too, and it hasn't broken a single term doing it. What's weight? What's owed? He said. Not what's fair. Don't ever put those 2 words in the same sentence up on that hill. I turned my cup around on the table. My 2 dead fingers were up against the palm of my hand, and I cracked them, and it made the sound it makes, which is a knuckle sound out of a joint that hasn't got a knuckle in it anymore. Third one, I said. What actually gets taken? You watched one. I watched a woman in Bly Pay in June, and I've been sick about it since, and I still don't know what I saw. Ordell took his glasses off the cord. He didn't clean them. He held them. A name, he said. That's what's owed, and that's all it's ever owed. The book collects names. It's a ledger. It has never had anything in it but dates, terms, and names, and if you'd looked at it for another 30 seconds, you'd have seen there is no column in there for a body. That's not what happened at the Beck house. That is exactly what happened at the Beck house. He set the glasses down. The name went out of the world and into the book. The meat's incidental. It always was. That's not mercy. Don't hear mercy in it. It's just the mechanics of the thing, and the mechanics don't care how it looks from a driveway. The boy, I said. The boy will be at the high school in Bly come September, Ordell said. He'll go out for track. His mother will set his plate, and he'll eat what's on it, and he'll say thank you, and he'll be pleasant to her. And he'll live to be 70, and she'll be buried out of the same church he was baptized in. There's just nothing in him that's his. I didn't say anything. That's what clean looks like, Ordell said. That is a witnessing done right. Everybody who eats at that table for the next 50 years gets to keep what they've got. And what was owed got paid. And it got paid out of the one place it was promised from. That's why what walks back out of a collection is sometimes still walking around, and why nobody in this county has ever been able to point at one and say what's wrong with him. Nothing's wrong with him. He isn't anybody. Deb came by with the pot. I put my hand over my own cup without thinking about it, and then took it off, and she filled it, and she went away. Last one, I said. I know what the last one is. Then answer it. A black cannot witness, Ordell said. His voice did not change. It got smaller, which with him is worse. That's the punishment, he said. People think the suit's the punishment, or the desk is the punishment, or the sunglasses are, and the suit is just a color, and the desk is just the only tier they've got left to look at. The sentence is 4 words. He cannot witness. He can stand at arm's length until his legs give out. He can keep his eyes open. It doesn't matter, and it never will. A term struck in front of a man in a black suit is unbound. Unbound, not void. Get that right, because getting it wrong is how a man dies on a hillside. Ordell put a finger on the table. Void would mean nothing happened. Unbound means it happened and there's no limit on it. Terms exist to hold the party in interest to a size. It's owed the one thing it's owed and not one thing more, and the only reason it's held to that is that somebody neutral stood there and wrote down the size. Take the witness away and the terms are still struck and the size is gone. That's Quarry Street. That's 4 people in a house for what was owed on one of them. And I've been 15 years trying to get somebody above me to say that out loud in a room. Do they know? I said. The black. Do they know they can't do it? They know they're not permitted, he said. That's not the same as knowing what it means. Tell a man he isn't allowed to sign his name and he'll spend the next 30 years practicing his signature. He'll get very good at it. He'll get so good he starts thinking that's the part that was ever real. He drank nothing. He turned a butterscotch over in his coat pocket. I could hear the wrapper. He carries them, and he can't offer them, and he can't take one, and I have never once seen him unwrap one, and I think he keeps them for the sound. That's 4, Ordell said. Now here's the 5th, and I'm giving it to you free. Don't do it. I wasn't going to. You've got a name in a rendered column and a man in a black suit driving around this county trying to buy his own back, and you just asked me in the right order, how to move terms, how to stand in for somebody, what actually gets collected, and how witnessing gets ruined. Those aren't 4 questions. That's a plan with the numbers filed off, and you wrote it on the back of a tow ticket. I said I wasn't going to. I know a liar, Ordell said. I've had one across the breakfast table from me every morning since the 17th of August, 1998. He got up and put his hat on and left, and he did not pay because he never pays, and I understood by then exactly what that was about. I sat there another 20 minutes. Deb came by once more and I waved her off. Then I folded the tow ticket along the crease it already had and put it back in my shirt pocket and buttoned the flap down over it. Nell came Friday for her weekend. The storm door banged, and by the time I got to the window she was already down at the road with the mail in both arms. 9:15 by the clock on the stove, which runs 8 minutes fast and has, since Shauna bought it, second morning of her weekend. I had let myself sleep, which I hadn't done in a month, because Friday night nothing happened and I was stupid enough to count that. I got my boots on without socks and went out. The grass was wet, and the light was the flat white of November, the sky one piece across. Down at the end of the drive, Nell had the mailbox door hanging open, and she was going through the stack the way she does, checking every envelope for her name, even though nobody has ever mailed her anything at my address. Anything good, I said. Bill, a thing about carpet. She held up a little white packet between 2 fingers like a fish she'd caught. And this. Silica gel. Do not eat. She keeps a coffee can of them under her bed, at her mother's, because she thinks they're contraband, and she has never asked why they're in shoe boxes. That was in the box, I said. He put it in there. She was already walking back up the gravel, sorting as she went. He said he found it in his pocket and didn't have any use for it. I stopped. She got 4 steps past me before she turned around, squinting, front tooth out ahead of the rest, the way it's been since it came in crooked. Who did? I said. The nice gray man. He walked me down to the box. Ordell. That was the first thing my head did with it, and it did it fast, 'cause that was the version where everything was fine. Ordell, at the end of my drive, at 9 in the morning, with his reading glasses on the cord, being polite to a kid. Was he old? I said. Little guy, glasses on a string. No. She thought about it, and she thinks about everything all the way, because she is not a kid who says what a grown-up wants. He was tall. He had a suit on. Gray suit. No. She shook her head. Dark. Like church. The wet was coming through the leather at the toe of my right boot. I stood in my own driveway on a Saturday morning and felt my foot get cold and did not move. Sweetheart, I said, tell me about him. He was just at the box. She shifted the mail. He said good morning. He had sunglasses on. There was no sun. There hadn't been sun in 9 days. Did he touch you? No. She made a face at that. He didn't even come close. He stayed way over there by the ditch. Arm's length. Farther than arm's length. He knew the rule and he kept it, and that was worse than if he'd grabbed her. Because a man who grabs her is a man I can do something about. What'd he say? He asked me what my name was. I did not do one thing with my face. I stood in the gravel in front of my daughter, and I did not do one single thing with my face. And what'd you tell him? Nell. Okay, I said. And then he asked me again. The wind came around the trailer and moved the mail in her arms, and she got her chin down on the stack to hold it. He asked you again. I said. He said, that's a nickname. He said, what's the whole thing? The way it's on your papers at school. She said it the way she'd say a line from a movie, flat, doing the voice a little. And I said, Eleanor Ray Chambliss. Out loud. Yeah. She looked up at me. He said, say it out loud. The pines at the top of the property went over in the wind and came back. My daughter was breathing through her mouth because her nose has been stuffed since Thursday. Names are the currency. That is the first thing Ordell ever taught me, standing next to a woman's overturned Corolla with his hand out flat like he was stopping traffic. Never say a signatory's given name out loud. Saying one is spending it, not writing it, saying it. She had said hers twice. He made her spend it herself. He didn't even have to lift it out of her. Nell, I said, what'd he drive? A police car. She corrected herself. Because she is mine, and she notices what kind of car a thing is before she notices who's in it. Not really. It looked like one. It was all black, and it didn't have the light bar, and it didn't have the sticker on the door. Plates? I didn't look at the plates, she said, and then, because she could feel it now, am I in trouble? No, I said. No, baby, you did fine. We went in, and I made eggs. I don't remember making them. I remember them on the plate, and her eating them, and me across the table thinking that if I picked up the coffee, she would see the cup move. So I left it where it was, and drank it later out of the pot cold and standing up. At 10, I told her to get her stuff. She said it was Saturday. I said her mother had a thing. She said her mother did not have a thing. I said, get your stuff. Nell, the way my father used to say things. And she got her stuff. Before we left, I locked myself in the bathroom and ran the fan and called Ordell. He picked up on the second ring, which he always did, and he didn't say hello, which he never did. I told him. All of it. The box, the packet, the ditch, the glasses in an overcast, the name. In 31 years, the man had gotten good at not saying anything, and I had gotten good at wading through it. But this one went long. What color was the suit? He said. Dark. She said like, church. That's not a color. It's black, Ordell. Another one of those gaps. I could hear something on his end. A turn signal, maybe. That same tick, tick, tick. Did she say it twice? He said. Yeah. All right. His voice did not change 1 degree, and that was the part that got me. Take her back to her mother. Today. Tell Shauna the furnace quit. Keep the girl inside a week. It's my weekend. Take her back, he said. Ordell. I've got a thing to do tomorrow anyway, he said, and hung up. I drove her to Hazleton. 50 minutes there with her not talking to me, which she does by looking out the window and answering in one word. 50 minutes back, with the seatbelt still buckled behind the empty seat, 'cause she never unbuckles, she just slides out from under. It was full dark when I pulled into Vetter's. One sodium light on a pole over the gravel, and under it, parked across 2 spaces, nose out toward the road, a black Crown Victoria. No plates. Not a blank plate. No plate, front or back, and no bracket holes where one had been. He got out when I got out. The suit. Shoes that had never been anywhere. 6'2" and thin the way a man gets thin from having no reason to eat. And I saw all of that before the smile came on. It came on all at once and stayed. Wide, closed, the whole mouth going back toward the ears without a tooth showing. It is what a man would come up with if somebody described a smile to him over the phone. "Mr. Chambliss," he said. "Yeah, just checking in." His voice was flat all the way across, no up at the end of the sentence, no down. "We've had reports of lights out over the reservoir. Have you noticed anything unusual, Mr. Chambliss?" "No. Have you been feeling safe lately?" "Get off the lot. Some people report missing time." The smile did not move while he talked, which meant the talking was happening somewhere behind it. "If you experience missing time, that's a very normal thing, and there's no cause for concern. I have knelt on a shoulder at 3 in the morning holding a stranger's belt around his own leg, telling him about my daughter to keep his eyes on me. I know what a man sounds like when he is saying words to keep from saying other ones. "You're doing that badly," I said. And he quit. He didn't get angry. The smile went off him the way a picture goes off a screen when the power drops. All at once, no middle, and what was under it was a tired man in a suit that fit him wrong across the chest. He took the sunglasses off and folded them into his breast pocket, and I made myself look, because I had been telling myself for 2 months that I wanted to know things. His eyes were fine. Brown, a little red at the corners, the eyes of a guy who's been driving all day. Nothing wrong with them at all. They just weren't being used for anything, and it was like walking through a house that still has the furniture in it. "Vance Perrin," he said. "That's the sound anyway. It doesn't do anything anymore, but it's the sound. I don't care." "You do?" He leaned back against the fender and crossed his ankles and looked out at the road like we were 2 men in a lot at night. 9 years I stood where you're standing. Arm's length. Don't blink. Don't take the chair. Ordell teach you the one about the door yet? Don't close one you didn't open. There it is. He said it without any warmth. 2019. The signatory let herself get photographed. That was mine to prevent, and I stood there and let the shutter go, and the picture testified, and testimony from a thing that isn't a party fouls the whole term. 4 days later, they took my name out of the book and put me in this. He picked at his own lapel with 2 fingers, like it had something on it. "You know what gray is," he said. "No claim. So somebody's been talking to you. Black is ownership. It's the mark they put on the ear, so anybody who matters can tell at 40 yards who holds the paper on me. And then they let me keep working, and that's the part nobody believes. Bottom drawer, the saucer desk, the lights over the reservoir. Freight," he said. "Haulers. Little gray fellas moving somebody's shipment 2 counties over and scared out of their skin the whole time. And for 60 years, men in my suit have been knocking on farmhouse doors asking about lights, and every one of us knows it's the mailroom. We do it anyway, because that is the sentence. We're the light bar on the ambulance. Everybody looks at the light bar." He said all of it in the voice he'd used for the routine, and that was how I knew it was true. "You went to my daughter," I said. "I went to your mailbox. You had her say her name." "Twice," he said. "It has to be twice. Once is a kid answering a grown-up. Twice is a person setting a thing down where it can be picked up." I had my hand around the door handle of the wrecker. "Here's the deal," he said. "Your mother's terms were never closed. They got transferred once, badly, and now you've gone and read your own entry, so you're not standing at the edge anymore. You're a party. Parties get collected." He put his hands in his pockets. "I want mine back. Out of the ledger and into my mouth. I've been putting a term together for 2 years, and I have everything I need but one thing, and it's the one thing I'm not allowed to have. A witness." "A witness," he said, and the smile came back on for half a second and went. "You stand at arm's length. You don't blink. You write what happens in the book, and you sign it, and you go home. One night. And I never come up this road again, and Eleanor Ray goes back to being a word." "And what do you give it?" I said. He looked at me. "That's the part where you don't ask," he said. I hit him. I have hit 4 men in my life, and I threw this one the way a man throws one in a bar, all shoulder, from about 8 inches too close. It caught him under the cheekbone, and something went in my hand that I'd feel for a week. He didn't fall down, he didn't step back. His head went over with it and came around again on the return like a shop door on a spring, and he stood there with his ankles still crossed against the fender and a split opening up at the corner of his mouth. Nothing came out of it. The split was there, dark, and it stayed where it was, and it did not run, and the smile came on. He went up there the next night without me. The Oldsmobile was nosed into the weeds at the bottom of the access road with the driver's door standing open and the dome light on, and the battery had been at it long enough that the light was the color of weak tea. Sunday, 5:10 in the evening, and already going dark. That time of year. The sky over the bank the color of a nickel. I put my hand on the hood, going past. Cold. He'd been up there a while. The access road up the Dunlow Culm Bank is 2 ruts and 140 feet of grade, cut for equipment that hasn't existed since I was in grade school. I went up on foot with the flashlight off, because there is enough light coming out of that hill without one. 2/3 of the way up, the frost stopped. It stops in a circle. A man can put his boot down on the line. On the low side there's white in the grass and it crunches, and on the high side the grass is standing up green in November, and there is nothing in between the two. A line drawn with a straight edge around a 140-foot pile of coal refuse that has been burning underneath itself since 1962. I crossed it, and inside a minute my feet were sweating in my boots. The smoke was going straight up. There was wind, enough at the top to move my coat, and the smoke came up out of the vents in that hill in columns with no lean in them at all, like somebody had drawn them in later. Kessler No. 3 sits in the side of the bank, about 40 feet down from the crown. Concrete cap poured in the 80s, and set in the middle of it a steel door the size of a cellar door, with a bar across it and a padlock that is not a padlock anybody makes. The door was shut. Ordell was standing about 10 feet off it with his back to me. "Hey," I said. He didn't turn around. His hands were out from his sides a little, palms open, the way a man stands when he has just set something heavy down and isn't sure it's going to stay set. The ledger was on the ground in front of him, open, face up, the pages not moving in the wind. "Ordell, stay there," he said. I stayed maybe 2 seconds, and then went around him and got out in front of where he was looking. The gray was coming up through him from the inside. I want to say this once, and then not say it again. It was not blood, and there was no noise, and nothing about it was fast. It was like a log in a stove an hour after the fire's out, when the shape is still perfect and the color is gone, that soft ash gray that holds every ridge of the bark until something touches it. It had his hands already past the wrists, and it was up his throat, under the jaw on the left side, and where it had been through, the skin didn't shine anymore. His coat was going with him. That is the part I didn't expect, that the coat was going too, and the buttons, and the cord, not the glasses. The glasses stayed glass. They were fogged from the heat off the cap, and he had not taken them off to wipe them, and he was not going to. "Ordell," I said. "Ordell, hey, hey, the other one," he said. "The other one comes up the same, and there's no. There's no. The other one comes up the same, and there's no." He said it 4 times. He got to the same word and went back to the front of the sentence, and started again, patient about it, the way a man works a bolt that's cross-threaded, and every time around the sentence had less voice in it. I got my hand out toward his shoulder. His arm came up between us, stiff, elbow-locked, and it stopped me at exactly the distance he had stopped me at for 2 months. In a ditch on Old Furnace Road, and in a driveway in Bly with a woman's hands going through the last of it. Arm's length. Not closer. Closer is a party. Not farther. Farther is not present. He was going the color of the inside of a chimney, and still holding me at arm's length, so it wouldn't take me with him. "You came up here alone," I said. You came up here to put yourself in for me. Wasn't going to hold anyhow," he said. And he was right, and I worked it out standing there. Terms transfer in front of a witness. That is the whole business. That is the only reason a gray exists. And he had walked up here in the dark, 60-something years old and 31 years in, and offered himself in my place at the door of the thing that was owed me, and there had not been one living body standing at arm's length to see it. Nothing bound. It took him and gave nothing back, and my name is still in the book. There's nobody to write it, I said. No, he said. The ledger closed. Nobody touched it. It came shut on the ground, with no more sound than a hand laid flat on a table, and the corners of it were soft the way they always were, and it did not open again. He got his hand up. There was still enough hand. Sheets in the glove box, he said. It's a week out. 2 on Ridge, 1 past the hollow, and don't let the hollow one wait. It doesn't like waiting. Ordell, envelopes are under the seat. They'll be right. They're always right. Don't count them. It's rude. He put the pen in my hand and closed my fingers on it with his own, and his own came apart a little at the knuckle doing it, and he didn't look at that, and so I didn't either. Don't stand under a kettle bottom, he said. I know. Don't look up at one twice. I know, Ordell. Then he did the one thing he told me on the first night never to do. The rule he called the first rule, because it was the only one that cost anything. Russell, he said. He said my name out loud. He said it the way a man sets a tool down somewhere obvious, so whoever comes after him can find it. And then he was standing there, and then he wasn't. There was no fall. I keep going back through it looking for the fall, and there is no fall in it. There was a man standing on warm ground in a cheap gray coat, and then the wind came across the crown of the bank, and then there was a column of smoke going straight up 40 feet behind where he had been. The glasses were on the ground with the cord still through them, and the ground under them was flat where his shoes had been. That's all. I don't know how long I stood there. When I got back down to the Oldsmobile, the dome light had finished the battery, and the door was still open, and the sheet was in the glove box exactly like he said, folded in 3. The pen was in my hand the whole way down. I hadn't put it in a pocket. I hadn't thought about it. It should have been warm. He'd had it in his fist, up on top of that hill where the frost won't lie and my boots came down off it soaked through with my own sweat. It was the temperature of the inside of a pipe. I drove to Bly with it in my cuff. The second floor at Bly Manor smells like green beans and bleach, and it smells like that at 4 in the morning, and it smells like that on Christmas. After the first year, a man stops noticing. Then one day he is in the elevator, and it comes at him the way a name does. She was sitting up when I came in. The aide, a heavy girl named Lorna, who calls everybody Han and means it, said she'd been sitting up since 4 and eating like a horse, and she said it glad, because they don't say what it means. Maybe they don't know, maybe they do and it isn't theirs to hand over. The TV was bolted up in the corner, playing a game show with the sound off. On the tray table was the placemat, one of the paper ones with a scalloped edge they put under the plates, and she had the golf pencil in her fist the way a kid holds one, and she had drawn the shape. She's been drawing it for 2 years. Long, low hump, one shoulder higher than the other, 4 lines coming up off the top of it going straight. Hey, Mom, I said. Russell, she said. I stopped in the door. She hasn't called me Russell since the spring of 2023. She calls me Petey. She has called me Petey through 2 Thanksgivings and a hip, and I correct her exactly once a visit, which is all I have ever been able to do, and then I sit there and answer to it. Sit down, she said. You're in the light. I sat down. You call it rallying. Lorna told me later, out at the elevator, that it happens at the end sometimes and there's no telling how long it runs. I never looked at a clock. What I know is the game show went to commercial once and came back, and that block runs about 4 minutes, and when it came back she was gone again. 4 minutes. That's what I got. Your hand swelled up, she said. I hit a guy. You always did that dumb. She reached over and took it. My left one, the bad one. And she put her thumb across the 2 fused fingers and worked them the way she used to at the kitchen table in 2009 when the cable came apart on me and I sat there for a month, not able to make a fist. She didn't look at it while she did it. She looked at me. You want to ask me about the paper? I got my breath. Yeah. Then ask Russell, because I don't have it long. I can feel it going out like a tide. It goes and I come back down in this bed and I know your face and I can't get to the front of it. August, I said. 98. You had 104 for 2 days. She said it like a woman reading a number off a bill. Then it went to 105.5 in the night, and Dr. Amsler came out to the house, which they did then, and he put his hand under your jaw and he stood up and went in the kitchen with me and said, "It's in his blood now, Dot." He said, "We'll take him down to Danville in the morning if he's still with us." He said that. If he's still with us. He was a good man, and he'd been up since Thursday, and he said it out loud in my kitchen, and I never went back to him after. "And you went out, Ruthie Kolar," she said, "from St. Barbara's. She had that boy that lived, the one with the hole in his heart. Every woman in that church knew there was a reason that boy lived, and nobody would say it above their voice. She held on to me in the vestibule at the summer supper the year before and told me where to go, and I went home and washed the dishes and forgot it on purpose for a year, and then I didn't forget it." She turned the pencil over on the placemat. "Old Furnace Road. Second pull-off past the bog. Walk up till the frost stops and stand still. And don't go past where you stopped. Don't take anything anybody hands you. Not a coat, not a ride. And don't thank nobody." She said that twice. She said, "Don't you thank them, Dorothy, no matter how it comes out." "You left us in the house," I said. "I left you in the house," she said. "You were asleep on the couch under the window because it was cooler, and Petey was in the chair next to you, and he was 19, and he was watching you breathe. He'd been doing that 2 days. He wouldn't go up to bed." She stopped, and I let her stop, and there was a long piece of it where she just held my fingers. "There was 2 men," she said, "standing in the field where the white quit. They had gray suits on, and they weren't dressed for out there, and the mosquitoes weren't on them. One of them was young, and he did the talking, and the other one was little and old, and he didn't say 2 words the whole time. He had his reading glasses on a string around his neck. He had a bag of that hard butterscotch in his coat pocket, and it crinkled every time he moved, and he never once put his hand in it. I did not say anything. He died yesterday afternoon on that same hill 200 yards from where she was standing when she saw him, and my mother was describing his coat to me, and there is no version of that sentence a woman with 4 minutes on her should have to hear. They wrote in a book," she said. "The young one wrote, and the old one stood off to the side and watched him do it. That's all he did. He stood there. And it went on a while, and I got cold in August, and then the young one turned the book around and held it out where I could read it, and he said, 'Ma'am, this is the shape of it. One kept, one rendered.'" Her thumb stopped on my fingers. "I said the one in the bed," she said. "That was mine to say, and I said it, and I'd say it again, and God can do what he wants with that. I said the one in the bed. Keep the one in the bed. Mom." And there was a second line under it, she said, and there was already a name wrote in on it, and it was yours. The game show went to commercial. Some outfit in Wilkes-Barre selling windows. I said, "That's the same as nothing," she said. I said, "If that's the price, then it's the same as nothing, and I'll go home." And the young one looked at the old one, just looked at him, and the old one put his hand out and took the book and walked off with it, out past where I could see, out where the ground was warm, and he was gone long enough that I sat down in that field. And when it came back, she said, the name on the second line was Peter. Down the hall, a call light was going, and somebody was getting it. That's the sound of that building. A soft bell, and then a woman's shoes. I didn't ask, she said. Hear me say that part, because everybody's going to want to make it that I didn't know. I knew. I read it twice, Russell. I put my finger under it, and I didn't ask one question, and I signed it, and I drove home in wet shoes, and went in that house, and your fever was gone. 2 weeks later, he went in the bog, I said. 12 days. There wasn't a mark on the guardrail. No, she said. She let go of my hand and looked at the shape she'd drawn on the placemat, and she put one more line coming up off the top of it, straight, and set the pencil down. I've known 28 years I killed the wrong son, she said. That's the whole of it, and there's no more to it. And I have laid in 4 different beds in that 28 years and never one time been able to tell which one of you I was glad about. I didn't say anything. That's not right. There was a thing coming up my throat that had been coming up it since I was 11 years old, and it had my brother's name in it, and it had her out at the sink that September with her back to the room, and it got all the way up, and I sat there in a vinyl chair with a torn arm, and held it in my mouth and let it go back down. Because she was right, and that is the part I have never gotten around. There was nothing to fight her about. She had it all, in order, carried by herself for 28 years in a head that was coming apart, and the only thing I could have done in that room was make her say it again. I got hold of her hand instead, the one with the wedding ring she never took off after he left, in '79, before either one of us. Your shoes were wet, I said. I know it, she said. I saw them by the door. I know it. I meant to get them out before morning. The commercials ended. I heard the music come back on that show, the little run of notes they do. I've got to get the wash in, she said. It's coming around the southeast, and it'll be on the line all night, and it'll smell like the hill. Okay. Petey, she said. Yeah, Petey, sit where I can see you. You're always standing where I can't see you. She was looking at the corner of the room about a foot off my left shoulder, and her hand was still in mine, and she didn't know it was, and the golf pencil rolled off the tray table onto the floor, and neither one of us went after it. I moved my chair over. I'm right here, I said. That was Saturday night. Shauna was screaming in the gravel lot when I came around the corner of the shop building. Her car was sideways across two of the customer spots with the driver door hanging open and the door chime going. She had one shoe on. That is the part I kept. She had driven the whole way from Hazleton with one shoe on, and she did not know it yet, and she stood there in the gravel with the other foot in a sock going gray at the toe. Nell's backpack was on the ground about 6 feet from the office door. Purple, with a horse on the flap that had been going bald since second grade. One strap still buckled. The top corner of the zipper had come open, and the little packets were out on the stones. The silica ones. She takes out of shoe boxes and keeps in a sandwich bag because she has decided somewhere in that head of hers that they are contraband. I found my coffee cup later by the front tire, standing up. I do not remember letting go of it. Where is she? I said. Shauna could not get the front of a sentence to hold. She got out the car, and then she got out a card. And then she got out that he had a card, a real one, with a seal on it and a phone number. And she had taken it and read it and handed it back, and she could not tell me one thing that had been printed on it. He opened the back door, she said. He didn't touch her. Russ, he never put a hand on her. He opened the door and he stood back from it, and she got in by herself. She got in like it was the bus, and I was running. I was running the whole time, and I was not getting any closer to that car. What kind of car? What? What kind of car, Shauna? Black, she said. One of the old cop ones. She had called 911 from the lot. That is her own board she called into. That is the room she works. She knows the voice that picked up, and she knows what the county has running on a Sunday, which is 2 cars and a supervisor. She was already telling me what they said about a description and a direction of travel. I was already walking. Gary Vetter came out of the office with his phone in his hand and his glasses up on his head, and he said, Chief, hold on now, Chief, and I went past him. I took truck 44 because it was nosed out and the keys were in it. The gray book was in the door pocket, where it had been since Thursday, up against the road atlas, soft at the corners, and the pen was in the cuff pocket of my coat, the one on the left with the burn hole in it, and I could feel it against my wrist through the lining the whole way out. I do not remember the light at the end of Route 924. I remember the left onto Old Furnace, and the guardrail going by on the bog side with the old splice in it, the one that has been there since before I could drive, and I did not look at it. The access road up the Combe Bank leaves Old Furnace at a cattle gate about a mile past the bog. There is a chain on the gate with a county padlock on it, and the chain is older than the lock. I took it with the bumper at about 15, and the chain let go at the post instead of at the lock, and the gate went up over the hood and off to the right, and something under the front end started making a noise it kept making for the rest of my life. That road was cut in 1960-something for a cat and a water truck. It is 2 ruts and a bench, switchbacked up the face of the bank, and the surface is not dirt, it is bank. It is the same red-black slag. The whole pile is made of loose as gravel in a bucket, and it moves under weight. A wrecker is 26,000 pounds empty, and every one of them is over the front axle On a grade like that, you have got exactly one thing going for you, and it is momentum. And the second you lose it, you are done. You are sitting there spinning and cutting yourself a hole to sit in. So I put it in low range, and I got it up to a speed that was wrong for that road, and I kept my boot in it and let the back end do what it wanted to do. The boom swung on the pedestal every time the frame twisted. The hook chattered against the deck. Grit came in through the vents, and I could taste it, and the taste in my mouth was metal, and I want to be honest about that. It was the truck, and it was also not the truck. At the second switchback, the temperature came up through the floor, not the engine. The engine was fine. It came up through the boot soles, the way heat comes off a driveway in August, and it was the 3rd of February. There was no snow on that road. There had been 4 inches in the lot at the shop. Up there the ground was bare and open and warm, and my own tread was printing in it behind me, like it prints in a fresh pour, and in the mirror I could see the prints steaming. Nothing else had printed. No deer, no dog, no boot, just my tires, and ahead of me, 2 lines from a car with the wheels straight. Smoke was going up out of the top of the bank in one column, straight, the way it always goes, and down below me the hemlocks along the bog were laying over sideways in the wind. I looked in the mirror again at the 3rd switchback, and there was something coming up the far slope off the road, out of the Blackwater side, not on the road, on the face of the pile, where the pitch is about 40 degrees of loose slag and there is nothing to stand on. It was coming up that at a walk. The head was wrong against the sky, and I did not work on it. I put my eyes back on the ruts. I was glad it was there. I did not know yet why I was glad, and I have thought about that since, about being 3 switchbacks up a burning hill with my kid gone, and being glad about the thing out of the strip pit, and about what a man has to have already agreed to before that is where his relief comes from. The Crown Victoria was at the turnaround, with the driver door standing open, and the dome light on, and the engine running. No plate on it, front or back. There was no key in the ignition, and it was running anyway. The radio was on, and it was not playing anything, just the carrier, that flat hum you get when a station has gone off but the signal has not. And I had heard it before, on a Tuesday in the dark, in a car on its roof in a ditch, before any of this had a name I could use. Kessler No. 3 sits in the side of the bank about 40 yards past the turnaround. It is a concrete cap poured in 1971, 10 feet by 10, gone gray-brown, with the county seal stamped in the corner of it and a steel door set in the middle. The door is a 1/4-inch plate with a hasp welded on and a bar across it. It has a sign that says the shaft is sealed. In 39 years, I never once saw it as anything other than a piece of concrete somebody's grandfather got paid to pour. I got out, and the ground was hot enough through my soles that I moved without deciding to. The bar was up. The hasp was hanging. The door was standing open, about 2/3 in on its hinges, and it had not been pried, and it had not been cut. It was open, the way a door in your own house is open. And there was light coming up out of the incline behind it, and it was not the color of fire. "Nell Chambliss," she said. "Nell Ann Chambliss." She was standing on the concrete apron just inside the door, with her hands down at her sides and her chin up, using her school voice, the one she uses when a teacher tells her to speak so the back row hears. Vance Perrin was behind her and to the left, with his hands folded in front of him. He was not touching her. He had never needed to touch anybody that I ever saw. "One more time," he said. "Nice and clear." She said it again. The incline went down past them into the hill at about a 15-degree pitch, timbered, the old rails still in it and gone the color of a stove. The light was coming up out of it, and it was not fire, and it was not a lamp. It came up in the way water comes up in a hole you have dug at the beach, from underneath, filling, without a source you can point to. The air coming with it was wet pennies and cold ash, and it was warm enough on my face that my eyes ran. Somewhere down under all of it, a very large door was closed, politely, the way a man closes a door in a house where somebody is asleep. I got the gray book out of my coat with my right hand. My left would not close on it. Those 2 fingers have been fused since 2009, and they work fine. They hook a chain, they hold a bar, and Standing there on that apron, my whole left hand went to something the shape of a hand and no use as one, and I had to bring the book across my body and pin it against my chest to open it. "Nell," I said, "come here to me." She turned around. She had her lunch bag in her fist. Still, this whole time, an insulated lunch bag with a cartoon on it. And she said, "Dad," he says, "you're going to be here in a minute." And she was right, and that is a hell of a thing to be standing there and be. Vance looked at me and did the smile, the wide one. Closed mouth, corners all the way out, no eyes in it at all. In the shop lot, it had made me want to hit him, and he had not fallen down. Up there, it did not make me want anything. It was a man doing a trick with the front of his face because there was nothing behind it to do anything else with. He had a pen in his hand, held down along his leg, the way you hold a pen you have been holding for a long time, same as mine. Same as Ordell's, the plain barrel, the cap worn through to brass at one end. "You brought the book," he said. "That's good. That's actually good, Russ. Put it down. I have terms to offer," he said, and he was not saying it to me. He had turned his face down the incline. His voice went flat in a way I had not heard him use before, flat like a man reading a docket. Terms offered by a party in good standing. A name entered fresh and clean against the return of one name out of the book. The name offered is entered in the presence of a witness and is a name of the local line, and the name is... "He can't witness," I said. The light down the incline did not change, the heat did not change, but that big, polite door underneath came a little bit up the hill, and I have never been able to explain to myself what that means except that when it happened, my back teeth ached. Vance stopped talking with his mouth still open. "He can't witness," I said again, louder, because I did not know how far down a thing like that has to hear, and because I only had the one card and I wanted to put it face up on the table where there could be no question about it. "There's nobody standing here. Whatever he's been saying to you for 7 years, there was never a body present. It doesn't bind. It never bound. Not one word of it." "Shut up," Vance said. "He's black," I said. "He's not one of them anymore. That's what the suit is. He can't stand for anything. Anything struck in front of him is unbound, and anything unbound gets taken whole, and you know that better than I do, because that's your business. That's the only reason any of them ever stand anywhere." I said, "Shut your mouth." He was walking at me. It took him 4 steps, and then he stopped. And he stopped because he had come inside arm's length of me, and he caught it. He actually caught himself and stepped back to correct it. And that is the moment I understood what I was looking at. 9 years of the work, 7 years off it. The man could not stand next to another man without measuring. "I've stood at 40 of these," he said. "I stood in the rain on Ridge Road for 4 hours at a well renewal. I stood at the Beck Woman's Kitchen when you were still pulling cars out of ditches for a living and thought the worst thing in the county was a drunk on the 924. I know the work. I know it better than Mace knew it. I believe you. Then it can be brokered." He had his hands out, ash all over his shoulders, all over the black. "It goes down on you up there, the way pollen goes down on a car. Everything in this can be brokered. That is the entire architecture of it, Russ. That is the whole of it. There is nothing in this that is not a deal, so there is a deal for me. There has to be a deal for me. I have been. He took off the sunglasses. I want to say what was behind them, and what was behind them was a man's eyes. Tired, 40-odd. A little red at the corners, the way anybody's are at the end of a long day. Brown, ordinary. The eyes of a guy you would stand behind in line at the Sheets and Bly and never once look at twice. There was nothing the matter with them at all. That was worse than anything I had been braced for, and I had been braced for a lot, coming up that hill. "They didn't take your name and leave you the work," I said. "They took the work and left you standing where the work happens." That's the sentence. That's the whole sentence. You can knock on a door for the rest of your life and ask a stupid question about lights over a field, and nothing you do at that door will ever count for anything, and that is not because they don't care what you do. It's because it doesn't matter what you do. That's why they let you. That's why they've always let you. He stood there in the dead ground, in the black suit, with the glasses down in his hand. "You're standing in the one spot in the world where you don't count," I said, "doing the one job you're not allowed to do." And then Vance Perrin's mouth opened, and something came out of it that was not him. It was not loud. It was not a growl, and it was not a voice out of a hole in the floor. It was flat, and it was tired, and it was the voice of a clerk who has read the same form 9,000 times, and it came out through his teeth without his jaw doing hardly anything at all. "The entry stands," it said. "The signatory is living. 14 hours. Vance's face did not know what was happening. His eyes were still on me. "A collection off a signatory at the end of term falls to issue," it said. "Issue of the body, issue of the line." Then it was done, and Vance shut his mouth, and after that the left side of it hung about a quarter-inch off true, and it stayed that way. 14 hours. That was Ma. That was Bly Manor Care, second floor, green beans and bleach. A woman who weighed 90 pounds now, and had known for 28 years that she had killed the wrong son, and could not tell which one she was glad about. Voiding it did not free anybody. It never was going to. All voiding it did was hand the bill back to the one who signed it, and she did not have anything left to pay it with. And when there is nothing left to take off the signatory, it comes out of the line. And the line was standing 8 feet from me, holding a lunch bag. I have not got a lot of things I am good at. I read wreck scenes. That is it. That is the one thing. You come up on a car in a ditch at 2 in the morning, and the road tells you the order it happened in if you will shut up and look at it. And I stood on that concrete, and I read that one, and it read the same in every direction. Nell now, or Ma tonight, and Nell later, and Nell's kids after that. Ordell taught me the rest of it at the anthracite in the middle of the night, with a cup of coffee in front of him that he never touched. A party can put himself in for another party if the weight is the same, and a party cannot witness his own substitution, because a hand can write, but a body has to be present, and they cannot be the same body. I was a party. That is what reading my own entry cost me, and it is the only reason I could do a single thing standing there. The one thing that ruined me was the one thing that worked. The other one came up out of the dark at the edge of the dead ground. It came up the last of the slope and stopped at the line where the frost starts, and it did not come across. Water was still leaving it, slower than water leaves anything. I got the shoulder and the length of the arm and the way the head sat, and I quit right there, the same as I quit at the strip pit, the same as I quit in the mirror on the switchback. There is a place where you stop resolving a thing and you go on with your work. It said, in Ordell Mace's voice, 30 years younger, "Stand where I put you." Then it said, in a woman's voice, in the flat county accent of a waitress with a pot in her hand, "You want that warmed up, hun?" Then it said, in the voice of a 19-year-old boy, "Both hands on the wheel, dummy." And I put my thumb on the page and opened the book to August 1998. There is the date. There is the signatory, Dorothy Ann Chambliss, in a hand that is hers and is worse than hers, the way writing goes when somebody is holding the pen too hard. There are 2 columns. One says kept, one says rendered. And in the rendered column there is a name that has been moved. You can see the move. The first name did not come out. Nobody took it out. Somebody wrote the second one over the top of it and let the first one stand underneath, the way a man patches a work order with the customer standing there, and the name underneath is Russell. I got Ordell's pen out of my cuff. It has no shine to it. It does not dry. It sinks the way a drop of oil sinks into a dry board and is gone, but the board is darker there forever. I thought about writing Peter Allen Chambliss, because that is what is on the stone in St. Anne's, and that is what is on the paper the state keeps. Nobody ever called him that. Not our mother, not one person at that school, not the man at the garage in Bly who sold him the Nova with the primer spot on the quarter panel and told him he had bought a boat anchor. What a name is what you answer to when somebody says it across the room. And my brother answered to Petey for 19 years, and then he answered to it one more time, off Old Furnace Road, in the dark, in August, when somebody said it into the water. I said it out loud. That is against the rules. It is the first rule there is. You were owed a name, I said. Not her, not me either. A name. Somebody handed you a boy and called that square, and it was never square, and it has been sitting on this page for 28 years. The heat came up. I'm giving you the name, I said, and I wrote Petey in the rendered column, in my own hand, in Ordell's pen, with the farrier standing across the frost line at arm's length with its eyes open, not blinking, not one time, all the way through. The pen went into that page and did not come back up. Then it took the fee. My own entry is 2 lines down and to the left, and I watched it go. Not scratched out, not burned. It went the way a wet spot goes on hot concrete in July, from the edges in, thinning, and then that part of the page was just page, and it had never had anything on it, and the paper was not even rough where it had been. Ma sold my brother the first time. I did the second one. Only one of those was mine to do, and I have never once been able to settle which. The ground went cold. It went cold all at once, like a burner shut off under a pan, and my boot soles knew it before I did. And out past the farrier, the frost came back across the dead ground, in a line moving away from us, and where it stopped in a circle. Nell walked over and took my hand. Her hand was warm, and she had crumbs on it. She looked up at me, and she opened her mouth to say something, and I already knew what it was going to be, because I have known that kid her whole life, and nothing came out. Nothing. She made the front of the word, and it went somewhere. She stood there with her mouth open, and then she closed it, and got a puzzled look. And then the puzzled look went away too, and she never got it back, and she has never once tried to say it to me again. Behind us, the steel door swung in on its hinges and closed itself, and the sound it made was the sound I had been hearing under the road for 2 months, only up here, at the top, in the open, where I could hear the whole of it. Vance was still standing on the apron, with his sunglasses in his hand. Vance, he said, Vance Perrin. He was saying it to himself. He was saying it the way you say a phone number at the door of a house you are trying not to forget it in. Vance, he said. V. And then he did not have any more of it, and his face went ahead and did the smile all the way out to the corners, because that is the only thing a mouth can do when there is nothing behind it to do anything else with. He put the glasses back on. He raised his hand and gave me the flat, wide wave you give across a parking lot to somebody you do not know. I thought about the two on my porch in the overcast, the half-second between their smiles. I had spent 2 months thinking of them as a bad joke somebody was telling at my expense, and I stood there in the ash and understood that each one of those men had been up a hill like this one, on a night like this one, and had run out of his own name standing on the concrete, and that what came down off the hill afterward was what I was looking at. I put my hand on the back of Nell's head and turned her toward the truck, and I did not let her look at him. I looked up at the top of the bank once, at the smoke, going straight up out of it in the wind, the way it does. Once, and then not again. Ma died on a Tuesday morning, 10 after 6. The home tried to call. There is a number on file for me there, and it is the right number, and it would not take. And after the 4th try, the girl at the desk went down the sheet to the next line, which is the shop, and Gary wrote the message out on the back of a work order in his own handwriting. It said, "Call about your mother." There was no name on the line, where the name goes. The nurse told me at the desk that she had been clear at the end. That happens, she said. Most times it does. She said Dorothy asked for both her boys by name, and got both names right, and then went back to sleep, and did not wake up out of it. I said that was good. Then I stood in that hallway with the green beans and the bleach until a man came by with a cart, and I had to move. The stone at St. Anne's has her on it now under my father, and Petey is 2 rows over from 1998. There is no paperwork anywhere with my name on it. I went and looked, because I wanted to know, and there is a probate file at the courthouse in Bly with 1 son on it, and the 1 son is dead. I bought a gray suit at the Boscov's in Bly for $60 off the clearance rack in March. Nobody issued it to me. There is nobody to issue anything to me. It hangs wrong in the shoulders and I let it, because that is how it is supposed to hang, and I have not once put it on for a funeral. I still drive nights for Vetter. Gary calls me chief and puts me on the schedule every week in his own hand, and cannot ever quite lay hold of the day he hired me. Comes up about once a month. He gets partway into it, gets a look on his face like a man patting his pockets, and then says something about the weather. The envelopes come the same as they came for Ordell. Gray cash, and the amount is what I needed that month, and I never told a soul what that number was. Nell was in the truck with me a Saturday in April, feet up on the dash the way she is not supposed to, and she said, "So what do you do now? Not what do you do for a living?" She knows what I do for a living. She has been climbing on this truck since she was 4. I said I stand there and watch so it stays honest. She thought about that for a while. Then she said okay, and asked if we could go by the dairy barn if it was open yet, and that was the end of it. Kids take a thing like that the way they take you telling them the mail comes on Saturday. She had a silica packet in her coat pocket, and she held it out to me at the light. I could not take it out of her hand. My hand would not go. She sat there with it out for a second, then she put it up on the dash by the defroster vent, and it is still there. She knows me the whole time she is in the cab. It is after that. She goes in the house, and I sit at the curb for a minute, and I know exactly what is happening in that house. And the second week she got as far as the porch and turned around and looked back at the truck like a person checking whether she left something on a table. Shauna calls the shop when she needs the weekend moved. She gets to my name and she stops, every time, and there is a half second of nothing on the line, and then she gets it on the second run at it. She has quit noticing that she does it. I have not. There was a black sedan at the end of Prospect Street in Bly in May, a little after 7 in the evening, parked at the hydrant with nobody in it. 2 of them were up on the porch of a duplex asking a kid something. He was 13 maybe. He had put a video up of a light over the reservoir and 11 people had watched it. They did the routine at him, the flat voice, the question about whether he had been feeling safe lately, the smiles a half second apart. I sat in the cab across the street with the truck running and I watched the whole thing, and I did not go over. They cannot do anything. That is not why I stayed in the cab. I stayed in the cab because the worst thing I know about those 2 is not that they are dangerous. It is that one of them used to be somebody. I go out Old Furnace most mornings on the way in from a call, because it comes out at the shop and because it does not, and I pull off at the wide spot below the bank and let the truck idle. The frost stops in a circle. You can stand at the edge of it in your boots and have your left foot on white ground and your right foot on black ground, and there is no line drawn anywhere, and there is nothing on the ground to say why. The smoke goes straight up. There is no wind up there this morning, and there is no wind on the road, and there is no wind in the hemlocks along the bog, and it goes straight up anyway, the same as it goes up on the days there is. Straight up, out of the top of the hill, in the first gray light. Straight up, and nothing coming down.